A captivating journey through the winding paths of ancient Greece is about to unfold. This exploration will follow the ethereal footsteps of Hermes, the swift messenger god, whose iconic winged sandals carried him across the landscapes of antiquity. The expedition promises to reveal the serene majesty of secluded temples, the hushed tranquility of ancient mountain caves, and the sun-drenched, dusty thoroughfares where weary travellers once paused, leaving their humble offerings at unassuming stone markers. Each location whispers tales of devotion and passage, inviting a deeper understanding of a world steeped in myth and tradition. As the ambient illumination softens, a profound sense of calm is encouraged to descend. The clamour and demands of the day are invited to recede, dissolving gently like the ephemeral morning mist that gracefully drifts across the ancient, sun-kissed Mediterranean hills, preparing the mind for contemplation and discovery. With the atmosphere now perfectly set, the narrative is poised to commence its unhurried exploration through the captivating sagas of the most ingenious deity in the entire Greek pantheon. The stage is prepared for the unfolding adventures of a god renowned for his unparalleled wit and resourcefulness, promising insights into a unique brand of divine intervention. During the hushed moments preceding dawn, when the ancient Greek landscape remained enveloped in the delicate pre-sunrise luminescence, an observer might have discerned an enigmatic presence traversing the heavens. It was not precisely a bird, nor definitively a cloud. Yet, for those with keen perception and unwavering stillness, the sight would resolve into a youthful figure, gliding effortlessly through the air, his feet seeming to hover just above the verdant crowns of olive trees. His distinctive attire included what appeared to be diminutive wings affixed to his sandals. This remarkable individual was Hermes, and even in those nascent hours, while the mortal realm still slumbered in profound tranquillity, he was already diligently engaged in the day's imperative tasks. The role of divine messenger was far from a leisurely occupation. It demanded unparalleled speed and precision. When Zeus, the supreme sovereign of all deities, wished to convey a matter of paramount importance, its transmission was invariably immediate. Should Hera desire to dispatch tidings to her sister goddesses, it was Hermes who undertook the swift conveyance. Indeed, whenever any of the august residents of Mount Olympus required an errand executed in the mortal realm, their summons invariably reached Hermes. Yet a distinct quality set Hermes apart from his formidable brethren. While Zeus wielded the fearsome power of lightning bolts, and Poseidon commanded the tumultuous seas, while Athena orchestrated grand strategies for conflict, and Apollo composed verses of exquisite beauty, Hermes resolved his challenges with an instrument far more subtle, yet frequently far more potent, his extraordinary ingenuity. Consider a vivid tableau from a quintessential morning in ancient Greece. The nascent sun has just commenced its task of imbuing warmth into the polished marble steps of a grand temple consecrated to Zeus. A venerable priest, clad in unadorned white vestments, circumnavigates the edifice with deliberate steps, meticulously ensuring every detail is prepared for the day's sacred ceremonies. The ancient olive trees respond with a gentle sibilance to the morning breeze, and from a remote distance the faint, melodic bleating of goats being guided to their pastures can be perceived. The priest's methodical inspection halts abruptly as his gaze registers an anomaly. Reposing upon the temple steps, exuding an air of complete ease and devoid of any semblance of intrusion upon hallowed ground, sits a youthful stranger, a countenance entirely unfamiliar to the priest. This enigmatic visitor is attired in a modest tunic, complemented by a unique cap that appears to be fashioned from delicate feathers. Most remarkably, his sandals are adorned with peculiar, diminutive wings. One might reasonably anticipate a surge of alarm within the priest. Temples, after all, constituted sites of profound sanctity and solemnity, where the unannounced arrival of strangers making themselves at ease was an unheard-of transgression. Yet, contrary to such apprehension, the priest experienced an inexplicable, pervasive sense of tranquillity. The young man possessed a particular, captivating smile that instilled an instantaneous, almost magnetic trust, defying any logical explanation for its profound effect. "Good morning," the stranger greeted, his voice possessing an exquisite, almost melodic timbre that harmonized perfectly with the soft rustling of the morning breeze through the ancient olive trees. "I trust my presence here does not cause inconvenience. I bear a direct message for you, originating from none other than Zeus himself." The priest's eyes, wide with sudden awe, reflected the profound gravity of such an announcement. Communications from the Olympian king were not daily occurrences. Indeed, the majority of priests completed their life's devotion without ever receiving a personal directive from the supreme ruler of the gods. "A message," the priest murmured, his voice barely a breath, imbued with disbelief and reverence. Hermes inclined his head subtly, his hand moving to a small, unassuming satchel that had previously escaped the priest's observation. From its depths, he produced a scroll that seemed to emanate a faint, ethereal luminescence, catching and refracting the nascent morning light. "Zeus desires you to be aware of his profound satisfaction with the meticulous stewardship you have exercised over his sacred temple," Hermes conveyed. "He is particularly gratified by the diligence with which you ensure the olive oil in the lamps remains perpetually fresh, and by your unwavering dedication to sweeping the temple steps with such exemplary care each and every morning." A profound warmth, a wave of pure, unadulterated happiness suffused the priest's being. While it was undeniably true that he devoted himself with immense pride to the upkeep of the holy site, the notion that Zeus himself had taken notice of his humble daily endeavours had been utterly beyond his most fervent imaginings. However, Hermes' demeanour shifted, his tone acquiring a distinct gravity. "Zeus further desires to impart a crucial warning," he continued, his voice resonating with newfound solemnity. "A particular merchant is slated to arrive at this temple later today. This individual will endeavour to peddle what he purports to be a sacred effigy of Zeus, meticulously sculpted by the most celebrated artisans of Athens." The priest, captivated by the sudden shift, leaned forward, his attention now utterly absorbed. Hermes proceeded. "While the statue itself may indeed possess an undeniable aesthetic appeal, and the merchant's accompanying narrative will undoubtedly be crafted with compelling persuasiveness, Zeus wishes you to understand that this artifact is, in truth, merely common marble, fashioned by the merchant's own brother-in-law. Although a perfectly competent craftsman, he is assuredly not counted among Athens' preeminent sculptors. The merchant's true intention is to ensnare you in a deception, coercing you into disbursing a sum far exceeding the statue's actual value. It is at this juncture that the profound depth of Hermes' ingenuity truly manifested. Unbeknownst to the reverent priest, no divine communique from Zeus concerning a merchant had ever been issued. Hermes had, in fact, masterfully fabricated the entire narrative. However, Hermes, possessing an unparalleled awareness of all occurrences across the Hellenic lands, was fully cognizant that a duplicitous merchant genuinely intended to visit the temple later that day, armed with an elaborate fraudulent tale regarding a sacred effigy. The question naturally arises, how did Hermes acquire such precise foreknowledge? As the ubiquitous messenger god, his ceaseless travels granted him an unobstructed view of all events. Only the previous day he had chanced to overhear the merchant meticulously rehearsing his deceptive sales pitch while ensconced beneath a fig tree, a mere 20 meters distant. Hermes harboured a deep affinity for individuals of integrity and diligent effort, such as this devout priest, and found the prospect of the man being defrauded utterly intolerable. Consequently, Hermes ingeniously devised a benign deception, a fabricated message from Zeus, to shield the priest from a far more insidious and financially detrimental falsehood concerning a sacred statue. This calibre of astute reasoning was precisely what cemented Hermes' legendary reputation throughout ancient Greece. He grasped implicitly that, on occasion, the most efficacious method of countering deceit was through a distinct form of cunning, one employed to safeguard virtuous individuals rather than to exploit them. The priest, overwhelmed with gratitude, expressed his profound thanks to Hermes for conveying such a vital divine message. Hermes, in response, offered a simple, knowing smile and a graceful tip of his distinctive feathered cap, conveying a sense of understated accomplishment. He then took a few measured steps away from the hallowed temple grounds. The priest watched, utterly mesmerized, as the minuscule wings adorning Hermes' sandals stirred to life, beginning to beat with a rapid, almost imperceptible flutter. In mere moments, the divine messenger ascended into the azure expanse, effortlessly gliding over the ancient olive groves, a beacon of swift purpose bound for his subsequent, unknown destination. As predicted, later that very afternoon a merchant indeed arrived at the temple, his cart laden with an object he confidently asserted was a sacred effigy of Zeus. The priest, maintaining an impeccable demeanour, listened with practised courtesy to the merchant's convoluted and embellished narrative, replete with grand pronouncements about renowned Athenian artists and the unparalleled sanctity of the marble. However, fortified by Hermes' prescient warning, the priest remained entirely impervious to the elaborate charade. He courteously but firmly declined the acquisition of the statue, and the visibly exasperated merchant, his scheme thwarted, was compelled to seek more susceptible patrons elsewhere. That evening, as the priest meticulously kindled the oil lamps within the hallowed confines of the temple for the approaching night, his thoughts returned to his extraordinary encounter with Hermes. An undeniable, almost miraculous quality imbued the messenger god's appearance, materializing precisely at the moment his sagacious assistance was most acutely required. The priest, though unaware of the broader pattern, had experienced a classic instance of Hermes' perfectly timed interventions, a hallmark of his unique method for aiding mortals. Indeed, Hermes possessed an extraordinary, almost innate faculty for comprehending the intricacies of human nature. With merely a discerning glance, he could penetrate the superficial facade and perceive the true essence of an individual's character. His perception was so acute that he could effortlessly distinguish between upright priests and deceitful merchants, between benevolent shopkeepers and tyrannical tax collectors, between magnanimous farmers and avaricious landowners. This profound insight into the human heart served as the guiding principle for his interventions, enabling him to determine precisely when to extend his benevolent aid, and when, conversely, to orchestrate clever stratagems upon those whose transgressions merited such a divine lesson. Yet, Hermes' celebrated ingenuity extended beyond merely resolving the predicaments of others. He garnered widespread renown across the ancient world for the remarkably inventive strategies he employed to extricate himself from challenging circumstances. On one notable occasion, tasked with delivering a crucial dispatch to Hera, he was acutely aware of her simmering indignation towards Zeus, and the potential for her wrath to be unfairly directed at the bearer of news. To circumvent this perilous situation, Hermes ingeniously adopted the guise of an aged flower seller, approaching Hera's sacred temple laden with a basket overflowing with the most exquisite, breathtaking roses ever beheld by mortal or deity. Upon beholding the resplendent blossoms, Hera's attention was instantly captivated, and she expressed an immediate desire to acquire some for her revered sanctuary. As she meticulously selected the choicest roses, engaging in a delightful conversation with the disguised Hermes about the optimal methods for preserving cut flowers, he subtly interjected an intriguing snippet of information regarding Zeus's most recent benevolent initiative for the benefit of mortals. By the time Hera fully comprehended that she had, in fact, received Zeus's message, she was already so thoroughly charmed and mollified by the captivating beauty of the roses that her prior anger had completely dissipated. This was a quintessential example of Hermes's unique approach, resolving a complex issue in a manner that invariably left all parties more content than they had been initially. He profoundly understood that the most masterful deceptions were not those designed to humiliate, but rather those that, in their subtle execution, managed to enhance life, however slightly, for everyone involved. As twilight descends upon the ancient Greek world and the final embers of oil lamps cast their hesitant, flickering glow across temples and humble abodes throughout the land, one might ponder the myriad other clandestine acts of ingenuity Hermes undoubtedly performed under the shroud of darkness. What additional deceitful merchants met their comeuppance at his unseen hand? Which other diligent priests found themselves shielded from misfortune by his subtle interventions? What further innovative solutions did he ingeniously conceive for dilemmas that appeared utterly insurmountable? The Hellenes of antiquity held a steadfast conviction that Hermes never truly succumbed to repose, even amidst the profoundest hours of night. He was ever present, somewhere across the vast expanse of the world, employing his unparalleled wit and sagacity to subtly ameliorate circumstances for those deemed worthy of his divine assistance. And perhaps, as one yields to the embrace of slumber, a fleeting image might form, the faint, silken whisper of winged sandals soaring overhead, bearing their astute wearer onward towards his next quiet, yet profoundly significant adventure. The astute messenger deity, whom we encountered in previous tales, was not always the seasoned arbiter of dilemmas, gracefully traversing the verdant expanse of olive groves. Indeed, much like all progeny, including those of celestial lineage, Hermes commenced his journey from a nascent state, Remarkably, his inaugural display of cunning manifested when he was but a mere babe, not yet having completed a full day of existence. Envision the tranquil grotto nestled upon Mount Saloon, the very place where Hermes was brought into the world by his mother, the nymph Maia. This secluded cavern was thoughtfully situated in an unfrequented nook of the majestic mountain, enveloped by a profusion of untamed herbs that imbued the air with the delicate fragrance of thyme and oregano. Within, the cave offered an unexpected degree of comfort, with plush furs generously spread across its rugged stone floor and a modest fire merrily crackling near the entrance, casting an enchanting ballet of shadows upon the ancient rock walls. Maia had deliberately selected this concealed sanctuary, desiring absolute privacy for the upbringing of her extraordinary offspring. It must be understood that Zeus was Hermes' progenitor, and Maia was keenly aware of Hera's considerable displeasure concerning Zeus's children fathered with other mothers. The distant mountain grotto thus appeared to be the quintessential setting for a serene and undisturbed childhood. What Maia utterly failed to anticipate, however, was the decidedly unquiet nature of Hermes himself. Upon Hermes' birth, Maia awoke within her snug cavern, fully expecting to discover her infant son slumbering peacefully in the soft, carefully arranged nest of blankets she had prepared. Instead, her gaze fell upon an unsettling sight. The baby was nowhere to be found. The blankets lay empty, and no trace of the child could be discerned within the confines of the cave. One might naturally assume that Maia would be gripped by a torrent of panic. After all, her son was barely 24 hours old, and the formidable mountainside teemed with predatory wild animals and treacherous, precipitous cliffs. Yet, as she stood at the cave's mouth, her gaze sweeping across the misty, awakening landscape, a gentle smile began to grace Maia's lips. She was, after all, a nymph, endowed with a distinct array of inherent magical faculties, and what these innate abilities were conveying to her was not that her precious infant was in peril. Quite the contrary, in fact, he appeared to be revelling in the grand adventure of his young life. Simultaneously, approximately 50 miles distant, Apollo, the resplendent god of the sun and mellifluous music, was embarking upon his day with a customary pleasant morning ritual. Apollo maintained a magnificent herd of sacred cattle within a breathtaking meadow situated near the venerable town of Pylos. These were no ordinary bovine creatures. They were divine cattle, flawlessly white in their coats, adorned with golden horns that shimmered with an ethereal lustre under the radiant sunlight. Each morning Apollo would dutifully visit the verdant pasture to inspect his cherished herd, meticulously counting every single animal and ensuring their robust health and contented demeanour. The meadow where Apollo pastured his cattle was, in truth, a truly spectacular vista. Imagine undulating green hills generously dotted with a kaleidoscope of wildflowers. A crystal-clear stream meandered gracefully through its centre, and venerable oak trees offered perfect, expansive shade for the animals during the sweltering afternoon hours. The grass always appeared impeccably green. The water ceaselessly sparkled with pristine clarity, and the cattle themselves seemed to radiate an intrinsic luminosity that eloquently mirrored their celestial essence. On this specific morning, however, Apollo arrived at his cherished meadow only to confront a most peculiar anomaly. The cattle were gone, every last one of them. Where there should have been 50 majestic white cows placidly grazing beneath the morning sun, there was nothing but an expanse of empty grass and a scattering of rather bewildered-looking butterflies. Apollo stood transfixed at the periphery of his meadow, striving desperately to comprehend the scene unfolding before his divine eyes. Cattle simply do not vanish, particularly not divine cattle. They possess no wings to take flight, and they are far too colossal to conceal themselves behind even the most ancient of oak trees. And yet there was absolutely no discernible trace of them anywhere. Then Apollo's keen gaze discerned something distinctly peculiar about the ground in proximity to the stream. There were footprints etched into the earth, but they were unlike any prints he had ever encountered before. They bore a superficial resemblance to impressions made by cattle hooves, yet their orientation was fundamentally incorrect. Instead of pointing away from the meadow, as one would instinctively expect from animals departing the area, these hoofprints appeared to indicate movement towards the meadow, as if the entire herd of cattle had deliberately walked backward out of their pasture. Now, Apollo was not a deity easily deceived. As one of the most intellectually gifted gods residing on Mount Olympus, he immediately grasped that someone had intentionally attempted to confound him by compelling the cattle to walk in reverse, thereby creating tracks that would deceptively suggest their ingress into the meadow rather than their egress. But who would possess such audacious temerity as to pilfer from a god? And, more significantly, who could possibly be clever enough to conceive of such an extraordinarily unusual method to camouflage the audacious theft? Apollo diligently pursued the trail of backward hoofprints for several arduous miles, leading him through dense forests and across babbling streams, over towering hills and down into secluded valleys. The perplexing trail guided him progressively farther from his idyllic meadow, winding its way through some of the most remote and breathtaking landscapes of ancient Greece. Along his investigative journey, he encountered various inhabitants, shepherds diligently tending their flocks, farmers toiling in their sun-drenched fields, and travellers making their way along dusty ancient roads. Apollo courteously inquired of everyone he met whether they had witnessed anything out of the ordinary, perhaps a herd of white cattle being led by a suspiciously behaving individual. But here lay the profound strangeness of the situation. Every single person Apollo conversed with provided him with essentially the identical response. Yes, they had indeed seen the cattle. The magnificent animals had unquestionably passed by, and quite recently too. However, when Apollo pressed for details concerning the person leading them, he received the most utterly peculiar and consistent replies. "Oh, yes," an aged shepherd affirmed, thoughtfully scratching his head. "I observed the cattle as clear as day. Beautiful creatures indeed. But the most peculiar aspect, they seemed to be following a baby." "A baby?" Apollo queried, absolutely convinced he had misheard the old man. "That's precisely right," the shepherd nodded with conviction. "Just a tiny infant. Couldn't have been more than a day old, yet walking along as boldly as you please, with 50 head of cattle meandering behind him as if he were their very own mother." Apollo gathered remarkably similar accounts from every other individual he encountered along the winding trail. A farmer's wife solemnly swore she had witnessed an infant herding cattle with a rudimentary staff he had ingeniously fashioned from a simple reed. A group of itinerant merchants adamantly insisted they had observed a baby somehow persuading an entire herd of cows to walk backward. Each narrative was more preposterous than the last, yet they all exhibited a striking and undeniable consistency. The enigmatic trail eventually guided Apollo to the very base of Mount Saloon, where the backward hoofprints abruptly vanished into a rugged, rocky expanse, where further tracking became utterly impossible. Nevertheless, Apollo's meticulous detective work had furnished him with sufficient clues to formulate an educated hypothesis regarding the potential whereabouts of his cattle. If indeed a baby was genuinely responsible for this audacious theft, and Apollo was now seriously entertaining the notion that this seemingly impossible scenario might actually be plausible, then the infant had to reside somewhere in the immediate vicinity. Apollo commenced a thorough search of the mountainside, scrutinizing every cave and potential hiding place where someone might conceal a herd of purloined cattle. It did not require him long to discover a narrow, secluded valley, cleverly hidden behind a natural screen of towering pine trees. And within that tranquil valley, grazing as peacefully as if they had always belonged there, were his 50 sacred cattle. Yet there remained no sign whatsoever of the mysterious diminutive thief. Apollo dedicated the better part of the afternoon to methodically searching every accessible cave and crevice within the general area. Finally, just as the sun began its majestic descent below the horizon, he stumbled upon a remarkably cozy cave situated higher up on the mountainside. A warm, inviting light flickered from its entrance, and Apollo could distinctly discern the soft rhythmic sound of someone humming a lullaby. Inside the comforting embrace of the cave, Apollo discovered Maya seated beside a small, crackling fire, gently rocking what appeared to be a perfectly ordinary, utterly innocent baby. The infant was snugly swaddled in soft blankets, his eyes were peacefully closed, and he seemed to be sleeping with the profound tranquility of any newborn child in the entire world. "Excuse me," Apollo began, his voice imbued with a polite deference. "I am in search of an individual who has stolen my cattle. Several people along the way informed me they witnessed a baby leading my herd away from its pasture." Maya looked up, her expression a blend of sweet surprise and the gentle amusement that mothers often display when someone utters something seemingly absurd about their beloved child. "A baby?" She let out a soft, melodious laugh. "Sir, I truly believe you must be mistaken. My son was born only yesterday. Just look at him. He can barely lift his head, let alone orchestrate the theft of an entire herd of cattle." And indeed, the tiny baby cradled securely in Maya's arms presented an image of complete incapability for any form of mischief. His minuscule fists were delicately curled near his serene face, and he emitted the soft rhythmic breathing sounds characteristic of peacefully slumbering infants. Apollo began to harbour a fleeting thought that he might have committed some kind of error in his judgment. But then, just as Apollo was on the verge of apologizing for his intrusion and preparing to depart, the baby's left eye subtly opened, and he delivered an unmistakable wink. It was such a swift, almost imperceptible gesture that Apollo very nearly missed it. Yet there was no denying the extraordinary sight he had just witnessed. This outwardly innocent-looking infant had just winked at him with the self-assured confidence of someone who had masterfully executed an elaborate practical joke and was thoroughly pleased with his own ingenious accomplishment. "All right," Apollo conceded, struggling to suppress an involuntary smile despite the gravity of the situation. "I know you were the one who took my cattle. The pertinent question now is, what are your intentions regarding their safe return? At this precise juncture, baby Hermes, seemingly determined that the elaborate charade had reached its conclusion, he promptly sat upright within his swaddling blankets, suddenly appearing far more alert and aware than any day-old infant had any right to look, and bestowed upon Apollo a grin that was pure, unadulterated mischief. "Your cattle are perfectly safe," Hermes declared, and his voice, though still undeniably high-pitched and childlike, carried an unmistakable undertone of profound pride. "I have been providing them with exceptional care. They are thoroughly well fed, adequately watered, and I strongly suspect they rather enjoyed their unexpected adventure." Maya observed her son with profound astonishment. While she had always perceived his extraordinary nature, she had certainly not anticipated his precocious linguistic abilities, nor his audacious cattle rustling to manifest so swiftly. Apollo, for his part, found himself genuinely captivated. That maneuver with the inverted hoofprints was truly ingenious, he confessed. "I have never witnessed anything quite like it. How did you manage to persuade the bovines to traverse backward?" Hermes, clearly gratified by the commendation, elucidated his method. "I fashioned miniature coverings for their hooves," he clarified. "These implements resembled natural hooves, but were affixed in reverse, so as the cattle progressed forward, their tracks conveyed the impression of movement in the opposite direction. Such was the brilliance and intricate design of the scheme that Apollo could not help but be deeply impressed, despite being the unwitting victim of the larceny. Here was an infant who had not only successfully purloined divine livestock, but had executed the feat with a degree of inventiveness and resourcefulness that surpassed the capabilities of most seasoned adult malefactors. "Indeed," Apollo eventually conceded, "I must acknowledge that this is arguably the most remarkable cattle appropriation in global annals, yet I do require the restitution of my cows." "Naturally," Hermes assented without hesitation. "It was always my intention to restore them. My sole objective was to ascertain the feasibility of the endeavour, and so, as celestial bodies commenced their nocturnal emergence in the twilight firmament above Mount Saloon, Apollo and the nascent, day-old Hermes journeyed together into the concealed valley to retrieve the hallowed cattle. The bovines appeared entirely unperturbed and showed no signs of distress from their recent escapade. If anything, they exuded an air of self-satisfaction, as though they, too, had relished their participation in such a masterfully orchestrated stratagem. As Apollo made preparations to guide his herd back to their rightful pasture, his thoughts lingered upon the extraordinary infant he had just encountered. Here was a progeny who, at less than 24 hours old, had already displayed a calibre of perspicacity and originality that most individuals never cultivate over an entire lifespan. Perhaps, Apollo mused as he observed Hermes offer a farewell wave from the embrace of his mother, Maya, this would not be the final juncture where their destinies intersected. A profound intuition suggested that a child capable of orchestrating such an elaborate deception was undoubtedly destined for unparalleled accomplishments, and as one settles into the tranquillity of their own evening, one might envision baby Hermes nestled once more within his snug grotto, at last slumbering soundly following his inaugural grand adventure, while his mother, Maya, reposes beside him, pondering what audacious feat her remarkable son would conceive next. The infantile trickster, whom we last observed peacefully reposing in his mountainous sanctuary, did not remain sequestered on Mount Saloon for an extended duration. Intelligence regarding Hermes' audacious cattle-pilfering exploit possessed an inherent swiftness in its dissemination among the divine pantheon. Consequently, it was not many days before Zeus himself resolved that he must personally encounter this exceptional progeny. Mount Saloon, during that epoch, was a locale of unparalleled serene splendour. One might conjure images of boundless inclines blanketed in wild lavender and fragrant rosemary, where the morning mist tenderly embraced ancient pine trees, and the only audible sounds were the distant melodious chime of goat bells and the gentle caress of the wind through the aromatic flora. Maya's cavern was situated loftily upon the mountainside, ideally positioned to capture the inaugural rays of each dawn sunrise and the ultimate golden luminescence of evening. Within the cave, the 3-day-old Hermes already exhibited clear indications of being no ordinary infant. While the majority of babies his age were content to merely slumber and partake of nourishment, Hermes dedicated his hours to meticulously scrutinizing every facet of his environment with an intense inquisitiveness. He would recline amidst his soft coverings, observing the ephemeral dance of shadows upon the cavern walls, listening to the melodic calls of avifauna outside, and one could almost perceive his nascent intellect actively engaged, assimilating information and meticulously archiving it for future application. Maya had spent these preceding 3 days immersed in a state of quiet awe at her son's remarkably accelerated progression. On his 2nd day of existence, she had discovered him seated perfectly upright, meticulously examining a small pebble with the concentrated focus typically associated with a seasoned scholar. By his 3rd day, he had somehow managed to silently navigate to the cave's entrance and back, seemingly driven by a desire to ascertain the vista from various perspectives. It was in the mid-morning of the 4th day when Zeus made his appearance at the cave. He did not herald his arrival with the customary grandeur of thunder and lightning, as he sometimes did when seeking to make a profound impression. Instead, he simply materialized at the cavern's threshold, presenting himself as a benevolent wayfarer, clad in a plain brown cloak and leaning upon a walking staff. Only his profound eyes, which held the immeasurable depth and sagacity of one who had witnessed the very genesis of the cosmos, betrayed his true, divine identity. "Greetings, Maya," Zeus uttered softly. "I trust you do not object to an old comrade stopping by to greet the newest addition to our celestial family." Maya had been anticipating this visitation ever since the incident involving the cattle. She offered a welcoming smile and gestured for Zeus to enter the cavern. "He has been awaiting your presence," she remarked. "I believe he perceives your true identity." And indeed, the infant Hermes had inclined his head toward the cave entrance the instant Zeus appeared, his bright, discerning eyes fixed upon his father with an expression of intelligent curiosity that was truly astonishing in someone so exceedingly young. Zeus comfortably settled himself cross-legged upon the plush furs adjacent to Hermes, blanket and meticulously observed his son. The infant reciprocated his gaze with an equivalent intensity, and for a prolonged moment the cave was enveloped in a tranquil silence as father and son quietly assessed one another. "So," Zeus eventually stated, his voice imbued with warm amusement, "I understand you have already left a rather indelible mark upon your brother Apollo." Hermes emitted a joyful gurgle and extended one diminutive hand towards Zeus's beard. When Zeus inclined closer to allow the baby to make contact, Hermes grasped a small tuft of the divine whiskers and gently tugged, as if assaying their genuine nature. He has been this way since his birth, Maya elucidated, always scrutinizing everything, perpetually endeavoring to comprehend the inner workings of mechanisms. Only yesterday I observed him attempting to dismantle the clasp on my cloak. He appeared quite vexed that he could not decipher its intricate design. Zeus chuckled softly and delicately disengaged his beard from Hermes' grasp. Intellectual prowess is a familial trait, he declared. However, this particular scion appears to have received an extraordinary measure of inquisitiveness to accompany it. What transpired next was an event that Maya would forever cherish in her exceptionally long memory. Zeus reached within the folds of his cloak and produced a diminutive object that seemed to emanate its own intrinsic luminosity. It was a caduceus, a resplendent golden staff crowned with two intricately intertwined serpents and a pair of delicate wings. This artifact belonged to my previous herald, Zeus elucidated to Hermes, holding the staff clearly within the baby's field of vision. She was a magnificent goddess named Iris, who conveyed messages across the heavens upon ethereal rainbow bridges. However, Iris has chosen to embrace new responsibilities, dedicating herself to assisting mortals with their horticultural pursuits, which necessitates the appointments of a new messenger. Hermes extended both tiny hands toward the caduceus, his eyes wide with profound fascination. The instant his minute fingers made contact with the golden staff, something truly extraordinary manifested. The wings adorning the apex of the caduceus commenced a gentle rhythmic fluttering, and the two serpentine figures coiled around the shaft began to stir, gliding fluidly around one another in an unending, mesmerizing gyration. "I believe he finds it appealing," Maya remarked with a fond smile. "More than that," Zeus corrected, observing as Hermes, against all odds, managed to grasp the staff despite its length nearly matching his own stature. "Observe his feet." Maya cast her gaze downward and gasped audibly. Small golden wings had miraculously materialized upon Hermes' tiny bare feet. These ethereal appendages perfectly mirrored those on the caduceus. They fluttered delicately, as if testing their newfound power, and Hermes responded with a peal of pure, unadulterated delight at the novel sensation. The esteemed position of divine messenger is not one for which one formally applies, Zeus clarified to his son. It is an inherent calling, and I believe it is abundantly clear that you were unequivocally born for this momentous role. Over the subsequent hour, Zeus meticulously outlined to Hermes the multifaceted responsibilities entailed in serving as the messenger god. This would of course necessitate frequent journeys to the majestic Mount Olympus to receive directives from the other deities. There would be extensive aerial voyages across the ancient world, meticulously delivering communiques to both mortal and immortal beings. The role would involve resolving complex issues, mediating contentious disputes, and perpetually, always, the imperative to exhibit rapid, creative thought when circumstances grew intricate. Hermes absorbed all of this information with the profound concentration of one genuinely enthralled by a significant career prospect. When Zeus detailed the more demanding aspects of the work, the instances when messages had to be conveyed to reluctant recipients, or when the herald was compelled to devise imaginative strategies to achieve seemingly insurmountable objectives. Hermes' eyes illuminated with a particularly keen interest. "I am convinced," Zeus concluded, "that you are destined to excel remarkably in this vocation." Yet Zeus had not concluded his exposition of Hermes' nascent role. Being the divine messenger, it transpired, encompassed several additional crucial responsibilities. Hermes would also assume the mantle of the god of travellers, vigilantly overseeing all who ventured far from their abodes. He would serve as the benevolent protector of merchants and traders, facilitating equitable commerce and shielding them from the machinations of thieves and deceivers. He would safeguard territorial divisions and frontiers, ensuring that accords between adjacent realms were scrupulously honoured. Perhaps most significantly, Zeus explained, Hermes would function as an indispensable guide between disparate existences. At times he would be required to convey messages between the vibrant world of the living and the shadowy dominion of the deceased. On other occasions he would assist lost souls in navigating their way to their appropriate final destinations. It was a grave undertaking, a task demanding not merely intellectual acuity, but also profound empathy and sagacious judgment. With each passing moment that Zeus spoke, Hermes appeared to mature and grow more alert. By the time his father concluded the explanation of his future responsibilities, the infant deity was seated with remarkable upright posture, clutching his caduceus with an undeniable air of self-assurance, embodying every aspect of the divine herald he was destined to become. "There is just one more matter," Zeus announced, once again reaching within the folds of his cloak. This time he withdrew a small, finely crafted traveller's hat, fashioned from soft felt and featuring a broad brim designed to offer perfect sanctuary from both the sun's glare and the drenching rain. "Every emissary requires appropriate accoutrements," he declared. When Zeus carefully placed the hat upon Hermes' head, it settled with impeccable fit, and from its sides, delicate wings unfurled, mirroring those already adorning his feet and his staff. Hermes instinctively reached up to caress the hat's newly manifested wings, and they fluttered gently beneath his touch, producing a sound akin to soft, joyful laughter. Maya, observing these extraordinary events, found herself swept by a tide of conflicting emotions, while immense pride swelled within her for her son, and profound excitement stirred at the prospect of his significant new station. A faint melancholy also touched her heart, at the realization that her tranquil days within the mountain cave were drawing to a close. Hermes would now be required to dedicate his time to Mount Olympus, diligently learning his duties and becoming acquainted with the other gods of the pantheon. Yet Zeus seemed to comprehend her unspoken sentiments. "He shall always possess a home here with you," the supreme god reassured her with gentle conviction. "Mount Saloon will forever remain his sacred birthplace, his secluded haven when he seeks peace and quietude. This very cave will endure as his perpetual sanctuary." And thus it was that Hermes, at an astonishingly tender age of barely 4 days, was formally appointed as the messenger of the gods. However, his departure from Mount Saloon was not immediate. Instead, Zeus thoughtfully suggested that Hermes spend a few additional days in the comforting presence of his mother, allowing him to acclimate to his burgeoning abilities and to practice with his newly acquired divine equipment. These subsequent days unfolded as a period of gentle yet profound experimentation. Hermes diligently learned to manipulate the wings on his sandals, making them flutter with just enough velocity to elevate him a few inches above the ground. He practiced gripping his caduceus with increasing proficiency and soon discovered its remarkable capacity to help him discern the thoughts and feelings of anyone he encountered. He dedicated numerous hours to traversing the mountainside, growing intimately comfortable with his new hat and relishing the refreshing coolness its wings provided for his head, even beneath the warmth of the afternoon sun. Maya watched her son's rapid advancement with a mixture of profound wonder and immense maternal pride. Here was a child unmistakably destined for unparalleled greatness, yet one who still paused to meticulously examine intriguing rocks and joyfully pursue butterflies through the fragrant mountain herbs. This singular amalgamation of inherent divine power and an innocent childlike curiosity rendered him utterly distinct among all the gods she had ever known. On his final evening within the cave, preceding his inaugural official journey to the majestic Mount Olympus, Hermes sat beside his mother at the cave's entrance, together watching the sun slowly descend over the serene, ancient Grecian landscape. The radiant golden light imbued his nascent wings with a shimmering glow, and the evening breeze playfully stirred the delicate feathers adorning his hat. "Are you apprehensive about tomorrow?" Maya inquired softly, her voice barely a whisper. Hermes pondered the question with serious contemplation before offering his response. "A little," he admitted candidly, "but predominantly, I am filled with excitement. I believe that being a messenger will prove to be precisely the kind of work for which I was intrinsically created." And as the first stars began to pierce the deepening twilight sky above Mount Saloon, both mother and son shared a quiet confidence that this forthcoming chapter in Hermes's life would be replete with precisely the sort of adventures that would fully harness and celebrate his remarkable and burgeoning gifts. Merely one day after his official investiture as the divine messenger, young Hermes was already beginning to grasp that the responsibilities of his new position encompassed a significantly greater amount of walking than he had initially anticipated. While he possessed the undeniable capability to fly when circumstances demanded, Zeus had thoughtfully articulated that a substantial portion of a messenger's work necessitated both patience and meticulous observation. This imperative, in turn, mandated travel at ground level, allowing ample time to perceive and register subtle details that might prove to be of considerable importance. On this particular morning, Hermes was deliberately making his way down the verdant slopes of Mount Saloon, heading toward the distant town of Pylos. His current mission involved delivering a crucial message from Demeter to a local farmer, providing guidance on the optimal timing for planting his wheat. This assignment was pleasant and straightforward, precisely the sort of introductory task Zeus typically allocated to new messengers to aid them in comfortably acclimating to their duties. The winding path meandered gracefully through ancient groves of olive trees and fragrant patches of wild herbs, and Hermes was thoroughly enjoying the leisurely walk. His winged sandals imparted an effortless lightness to each step, and his new hat perfectly shielded his eyes from the morning sun. Every so often he would pause his journey to closely examine something that piqued his interest, a particularly vibrant flower, an unusually sculpted rock formation, or a small bird meticulously constructing its nest within an olive branch It was during one of these contemplative pauses that Hermes made a profound discovery, one that would irrevocably alter the course of music. He had briefly halted near a small, gurgling stream to quench his thirst, when his gaze fell upon something slowly moving across the path directly ahead of him. It was a tortoise, an ancient-looking creature adorned with a shell of exquisite, intricate patterns, proceeding toward the stream with the unhurried, dignified pace for which tortoises are renowned. Now, most individuals would have simply circumvented the creature and continued their journey, but Hermes possessed a mind uniquely attuned to perceiving possibilities in every encounter. As he observed the tortoise's slow, deliberate progress, his thoughts gravitated towards the creature's shell. It was almost perfectly bowl-shaped, featuring a natural hollow that subtly resonated when the tortoise moved. The sound was exceedingly faint, yet Hermes's exceptionally keen ears immediately detected it. At that precise moment, a groundbreaking idea began to coalesce within his mind. Hermes had always harbored a deep fascination with sounds and the art of music. Even in his remarkably short life, he had already discerned that various materials produced distinctly different sounds when struck, plucked, or blown through. He had engaged in playful experimentation, crafting rudimentary whistles from hollow reeds, fashioning drums from ancient hollowed-out logs, and creating rattles from dried seed pods. However, he had never quite succeeded in creating an instrument capable of producing the kind of intricate, beautiful melodies he sometimes vividly imagined within his own mind. Gazing at the tortoise's shell, Hermes suddenly perceived the definitive solution to his enduring creative challenge. Now, before any concern arises regarding the tortoise, it is important to understand that this particular creature had already lived for several centuries and had, quite recently, determined that its time had come to transition into whatever succeeds a tortoise's earthly existence. In fact, the tortoise appeared almost content when Hermes gently approached and thoughtfully articulated his novel idea. It was as if the ancient creature was pleased to know that its beautiful shell would become an integral part of something that would bring profound joy to countless others. Hermes worked with utmost care and profound respect, and when his delicate task was complete, he possessed a flawless bowl meticulously fashioned from the tortoise's shell. However, this was merely the initial phase of his ambitious plan. Subsequently, Hermes required strings for his nascent instrument. This presented a more formidable challenge, but fortuitously he soon spotted a small herd of cattle grazing peacefully nearby. These were not divine cattle such as those belonging to Apollo, but rather ordinary cows owned by a local farmer. Hermes approached the farmer and clearly explained his creative project. "I am endeavoring to construct a musical instrument," he informed the man, "and I am in need of some sinew to create its strings. Would you be inclined to exchange some cattle sinew for a special blessing upon your herd?" The farmer observed this youthful stranger, with his peculiar hat and winged sandals, and an intuitive sense told him that this was no ordinary request emanating from an ordinary individual. What manner of blessing? He inquired cautiously, his voice tinged with a healthy skepticism. "Your cattle will never become lost," Hermes promised with unwavering assurance. "No matter how extensively they may wander, they will invariably find their way home safely." This seemed like a most equitable trade to the farmer, who was perpetually plagued by anxiety concerning his animals straying too far from the security of the farm. He willingly provided Hermes with several long strips of sinew, and in return Hermes gently touched each of the cows upon the forehead, bestowing upon them an unerring and innate sense of direction. With both his meticulously crafted shell and his newly acquired strings, Hermes sought out a comfortable and secluded spot beneath the welcoming shade of an olive tree, and there he commenced the intricate work of constructing his instrument. He carefully stretched the sinew strips across the opening of the shell, meticulously adjusting the tension until each individual string produced a clear, distinct musical note when plucked. He fashioned 7 strings in total, tuning them with expert precision to create a harmonious scale that exquisitely pleased his discerning ear. Yet Hermes's creative endeavour was not yet complete. The instrument necessitated an additional component to facilitate the musician's proper grip and optimal hand positioning for playing. Hermes ingeniously resolved this practical problem by attaching 2 gracefully curved pieces of polished wood to either side of the shell, thereby creating what would later become universally known as the arms of the lyre. When his remarkable work was finally complete, Hermes held in his hands an object that had never before existed in the annals of the world's history. He tentatively plucked a single string in an experimental fashion, and a gentle smile graced his lips at the pure, exquisitely sweet sound it produced. Then he ventured to strum several strings together, and was utterly delighted by the rich, resonant harmony that resulted. For the duration of the next hour, Hermes remained seated beneath the venerable olive tree, immersing himself in the process of learning to play his groundbreaking new instrument. He swiftly discovered that different combinations of strings evoked a diverse spectrum of moods. Some arrangements produced sounds that were joyful and energetically vibrant, while others were gentle and profoundly soothing. Some melodies conjured images of sunrise over majestic mountains in his mind, while others reminded him of the soft patter of rain falling gently upon leaves. As he played, Hermes began to sing softly, spontaneously composing lyrics to accompany the enchanting melodies that flowed effortlessly from his lyre. He sang about his morning walk, about the venerable tortoise who had so generously contributed its shell, about the farmer's blessed cattle, about the ancient olive trees, and about the crystal-clear stream where he had paused for water. The exquisite combination of the lyre's music and his own melodious voice created something so utterly beautiful that birds began to gather in the branches above him, drawn by the enchanting sounds, to listen in rapt admiration. It was while Hermes, the resourceful young deity, found himself deeply engrossed in this novel musical experimentation that Apollo, the resplendent god of music and poetry, materialized. Apollo had been traversing the local environs, attending to his own divine affairs, when his ears caught the utterly unique cadence of music, unlike any melody he had ever encountered before. As the venerable patron of harmonic arts and lyrical verse, Apollo was instinctively compelled to investigate the source of such an enchanting sound. What he ultimately discovered was the youthful Hermes, seated serenely beneath the boughs of an ancient olive tree, deftly playing an instrument that was entirely unfamiliar to Apollo's discerning gaze, and vocalizing with an innate musicality that was truly remarkable in its effortless perfection. Apollo remained at the periphery of the olive grove for several minutes, listening in profound astonishment, The music itself was masterfully executed, technically excellent in every respect. The innovative instrument was impeccably calibrated, and Hermes' performance demonstrated an inherent grasp of harmonic principles and rhythmic complexities that typically required years of dedicated practice and extensive tutelage to cultivate. Yet, beyond its technical prowess, the music possessed an evocative emotional quality that resonated deeply within Apollo's very being. It was jubilant without descending into triviality, intricate without becoming affected, and exquisitely beautiful in a manner that seemed utterly organic and spontaneously generated. When Hermes concluded his captivating song and subsequently perceived Apollo standing nearby, he offered a genial smile and waved with cheerful familiarity. "Greetings, my esteemed brother," he called out with an inviting tone. "Would you perhaps care to experience the sound of my newest creation?" Apollo advanced slowly, his gaze riveted upon the peculiar lyre held within Hermes' hands. "What precisely is that remarkable contraption?" he inquired, his voice imbued with a profound and genuine curiosity. "I have chosen to name it a lyre," Hermes elucidated, elevating the instrument for Apollo to scrutinize in greater detail. "I fashioned it from the sturdy shell of a tortoise, several strands of robust cattle sinew, and carefully selected pieces of olive wood. Allow me to demonstrate its voice. Once more." Hermes then played a concise, dulcet melody that seemed to encapsulate the very essence of a tranquil morning unfolding across the ancient Hellenic landscape. Apollo listened with the rapt concentration of a true connoisseur of sound, and when the brief composition concluded, he shook his head slowly. A profound sense of wonder etched upon his features. "That, my brother, is absolutely extraordinary," Apollo declared, his voice filled with genuine awe. "I have truly never before heard anything quite like it. The sound it produces is so pristine, so perfectly balanced in its resonance, and the masterful way in which you play it. One would surmise you have been honing your craft for countless years." "It is not nearly as difficult as it appears," Hermes responded with characteristic modesty, a slight shrug accompanying his words. "Once one comprehends the intricate interplay of the strings, the music seems to flow forth almost effortlessly, as if it plays itself. Would you be inclined to try your hand at it?" Apollo accepted the lyre with the profound reverence typically reserved for handling a priceless work of art, his fingers gently tracing its unique contours. He carefully plucked each individual string, listening intently to the distinct timbre and precise pitch of each emergent note. Then, with a tentative sweep, he tried strumming several strings together, and was utterly astonished by the rich, complex harmonies that resonated forth. For the next few minutes, Apollo diligently experimented with the innovative instrument, and it swiftly became unequivocally clear that he possessed an innate, natural gift for its manipulation. His extensive musician's training, honed over centuries, allowed him to grasp the lyre's vast possibilities instantaneously, and soon he was composing intricate melodies that compelled even Hermes himself to pause and listen in quiet admiration. "This is truly incredible," Apollo exclaimed, his voice now brimming with unbridled excitement and revelation. "This instrument, it is precisely what I have been seeking for so long. I have endeavored for years to discover a method to create music that could truly rival and complement the profound beauty of poetry, and this magnificent lyre, your creation, renders that aspiration entirely possible." Hermes observed his brother's intense enthusiasm with a burgeoning sense of pleasure and satisfaction. It was undeniably clear that Apollo appreciated the nuanced capabilities of the lyre in a manner that Hermes, for all his talent, could not quite match. While Hermes certainly derived enjoyment from music and possessed an inherent aptitude for its creation, Apollo was demonstrably and profoundly passionate about it. For Apollo, music was not merely an activity or a skill, it was an intrinsic and essential part of his very identity, fundamental to his divine essence. "You know," Hermes remarked thoughtfully, his gaze fixed on the beautifully crafted instrument, "I genuinely believe this lyre would find greater fulfillment and be far happier in your possession than it ever could with me." Apollo looked up from the instrument, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "What precisely do you mean by that, brother?" he asked. "I fashioned it primarily because I was intensely curious about the intricate mechanics of how sounds work and how they could be combined," Hermes explained with an open gesture. "And I am exceedingly glad I did. It proved to be a most enjoyable undertaking, and I certainly acquired a great deal of knowledge. However, you, Apollo, are the revered god of music. You possess the profound understanding of what this instrument can truly achieve, and you, far more than I, can coax it to sing in ways I could never possibly evoke." Apollo was deeply affected by his brother's unexpected and profound generosity. "Are you absolutely certain?" he inquired, his voice softened by emotion. "You, Hermes, created something entirely novel here. This magnificent lyre is unequivocally your brilliant invention." "I am indeed certain," Hermes affirmed with a warm, genuine smile. "Besides, I still vividly recall the incident involving the cattle. I never properly offered my apologies for that particular escapade, and I believe this might serve as an excellent means to make amends for it." Apollo let out a gentle laugh, a sound of pure delight, and carefully cradled the lyre in his arms, his touch reverent. "Consider it entirely forgotten," he declared. "This, dear brother, is unequivocally the most wonderful gift I have ever had the privilege to receive." And so it came to pass that the world's very first lyre, a testament to ingenious craftsmanship, became Apollo's most cherished and prized instrument. Consequently, Apollo became widely renowned throughout the entirety of ancient Greece as not only the supreme god of music and poetry, but also as the undisputed master of the lyre. Yet he never once forgot that it was his exceptionally clever younger brother Hermes who had conceived and invented the instrument in the first place. Many years later, whenever Apollo performed upon the lyre at grand festivals and joyous celebrations, he would invariably recount the captivating story of how Hermes had ingeniously created the instrument from a humble tortoise shell, resilient cattle sinew, and pieces of sturdy olive wood during what had begun as a routine morning stroll. This charming narrative achieved widespread fame across all of Greece, and Hermes, already celebrated as the swift messenger god, also became known as the brilliant inventor of one of the world's most exquisitely beautiful musical instruments. As for Hermes himself, he cheerfully continued on his journey toward Pylos that very day, a light, melodious whistle accompanying his steps. He had commenced the morning with the seemingly simple task of delivering a message, and he was concluding it with the profound satisfaction of having brought forth a creation destined to bring immense joy to countless people for generations to come. It was precisely this kind of serendipitous and unexpected adventure that rendered his role as a divine messenger so consistently captivating and interesting. And if one listens with keen attention on particularly quiet evenings, one might still discern the faint, distant sound of Apollo's lyre, its melodious strains gently drifting across the verdant hills of Greece, playing enchanting tunes that first took root in the inventive mind of young Hermes on a remarkably peaceful morning long, long ago. Following the resounding success of his lyre-making adventure, Hermes found himself increasingly entrusted with assignments of growing importance and complexity from Zeus, the king of the gods. No longer was his divine mandate confined to merely delivering straightforward messages to humble farmers concerning optimal crop timing, or gently reminding shepherds to meticulously perform their proper offerings at local temples. Now, Zeus was reposing his confidence in Hermes with critical communications that possessed the potential to significantly influence the fate of entire cities, determine the pivotal outcomes of grand wars, and shape the intricate relationships between the powerful gods and the mortal inhabitants of the earth. It was on a crisp, invigorating autumn morning that Hermes was summoned to receive what would prove to be one of his most challenging assignments yet. He had been called to the majestic great hall of Mount Olympus, where Zeus regularly held court amidst towering marble columns that ascended majestically into ethereal clouds and swirling mist. The hall, perpetually impressive in its grandeur, seemed particularly resplendent on this specific day, with streams of golden light pouring through its lofty windows and the very air shimmering with impalpable divine energy that caused even other deities to feel a slight sense of awe. Zeus sat upon his magnificent throne, which had been intricately carved from a single colossal sapphire and adorned with powerful images of eagles and bolts of lightning. But despite the breathtaking opulence of the setting, the supreme god's expression was noticeably troubled, and Hermes could immediately discern that a matter of serious gravity was unfolding. "Hermes," Zeus intoned, his powerful voice reverberating slightly within the vast expanse of the hall. "I possess a message that requires immediate delivery to the esteemed city of Thebes, but I must impress upon you that this will not be a simple, routine transmission. The message in question concerns a prophecy, and prophecies, as you are undoubtedly aware, can be exceedingly intricate and delicate matters." Hermes nodded in solemn acknowledgement. He had learned through his relatively brief but impactful experience as a divine messenger that prophecies were consistently among the most difficult communications to manage effectively. Unlike straightforward commands or simple informational dispatches, prophecies demanded to be conveyed in precisely the correct manner, at the exact opportune moment, and to the unequivocally designated individual. To err in any of these crucial details could result in the prophecy being gravely misunderstood, completely disregarded, or even worse, could inadvertently precipitate an outcome entirely antithetical to its intended purpose. "The prophecy at hand concerns King Laius of Thebes," Zeus continued, his gaze unwavering. "He is generally considered a virtuous man and an equitable ruler, but he has recently been making certain decisions that I foresee will inevitably lead to significant tribulations for his kingdom. The prophecy is specifically designed to serve as a warning to him and to afford him a crucial opportunity to alter his current trajectory." Zeus then presented Hermes with a scroll that appeared to emanate its own subtle inner luminescence. The message within this scroll needs to be delivered to Laius personally. However, herein lies the predicament. He is presently immersed in the midst of a grand festival, celebrating his recent and notable military victory. He is surrounded by a jubilant populace, esteemed visiting dignitaries and fellow monarchs from neighbouring cities. In such an atmosphere of triumph and revelry, he will be in no mood whatsoever to entertain sombre warnings about potential future problems. Hermes studied the glowing scroll thoughtfully, his mind already assessing the complexities. So I must devise a method to ensure he takes this prophecy seriously, even though he is currently basking in a state of confidence and recent success, Hermes deduced. Precisely so, Zeus affirmed. And it needs to transpire without delay. The longer he postpones heeding this vital warning, the more arduous it will become for him to avert the grave problems the prophecy explicitly describes. Hermes carefully tucked the luminous scroll securely into his messenger bag, a pouch enchanted to protect its contents, and prepared for his swift departure to Thebes. However, as he soared gracefully over the picturesque Greek countryside, his astute mind was already grappling with the intricate problem of how best to approach King Laius in his current celebratory state. Simply materializing in the heart of the boisterous festival and abruptly announcing that he possessed a dire prophecy to deliver would, he concluded, almost certainly prove ineffectual. Monarchs who are revelling in the glory of military victories are generally disinclined to interrupt their festivities to entertain grim predictions of potential future difficulties. As Hermes glided silently over the sprawling city of Thebes, he could indeed confirm that the festival was in full, vibrant swing. The city's thoroughfares were elaborately decorated with a profusion of colourful banners and verdant garlands of fresh flowers. Citizens were dancing with uninhibited joy in the public squares, their laughter echoing through the streets. Vendors were busily purveying an array of special festival foods, their enticing aromas wafting through the air. Everywhere there was a pervasive atmosphere of unadulterated joy and spirited celebration. In the very heart of the bustling city, the magnificent royal palace was brilliantly illuminated by hundreds of flickering oil lamps, casting a warm, golden glow. From the palace courtyard, Hermes could distinctly hear the lively strains of music and the cheerful sounds of laughter drifting upwards. Hermes alighted quietly and unobtrusively upon a rooftop near the palace, taking a moment to observe the unfolding celebration from his vantage point. King Laius was readily identifiable. He was seated prominently at the head table in the palace courtyard, resplendent in a golden crown, and appeared genuinely content as he watched his people revel in their triumph. He was clearly a popular and beloved ruler, and his subjects seemed to hold him in high esteem. This observation, Hermes mused, was a positive sign. It signified that Laius was the kind of monarch who genuinely cared about the welfare and prosperity of his people, and therefore he might indeed be amenable to listening to a warning, provided it was presented to him in the most appropriate and persuasive manner. Yet Hermes observed that the monarch was encompassed by a throng of counsellors, military commanders, and esteemed foreign representatives, each seemingly vying for his exclusive regard. A constant stream of individuals desired to commend him on his triumph, present him with tokens of esteem, or engage in discourse concerning prospective pacts and commercial accords. Securing a confidential interlude with King Laius appeared an insurmountable challenge. As the divine messenger surveyed the boisterous festivities, a strategic concept began to crystallize within his thoughts. It was an audacious maneuver, demanding impeccable synchronization, but it held the promise of success. Hermes descended swiftly to the city's bustling marketplace, which lay largely deserted due to the ongoing revelry. There he located a vendor's booth specializing in ceramics and discreetly procured a modest earthenware goblet and a diminutive oil-burning lamp. Subsequently, he proceeded towards the royal residence. Rather than attempting entry through the principal gates, he sought out a discreet secondary portal typically utilized by retainers, conveying provisions and vintages from the culinary quarters. Adopting the guise of a youthful attendant bearing sustenance, Hermes navigated the intricate labyrinth of palace hallways, advancing towards the central courtyard. His design was to merge seamlessly with the domestic staff and patiently anticipate the propitious instant to engage the sovereign. The opportune juncture presented itself approximately 60 minutes later when King Laius withdrew from the principal festivities to attend a modest sanctuary situated in a tranquil recess of the royal garden. This sacred edifice was consecrated to Athena, the venerable goddess of sagacity, and it seemed Laius had resolved to present a personal oblation of gratitude for his recent martial success. Hermes observed intently as the monarch ignited aromatic resins at the altar and remained in silent contemplation for several fleeting moments of supplication. This situation was supremely advantageous. Laius found himself in solitude. His mental state was one of profound reverence, and his thoughts were already inclined towards celestial concerns. Hermes advanced with a hushed tread, still clutching his unadorned goblet and flickering oil lamp. "Your sovereign grace," he articulated in a subdued tone, "I humbly beg your pardon for this intrusion." Laius pivoted, anticipating the presence of one of his retainers bearing an inquiry regarding the festival's intricate preparations. Instead, his gaze fell upon a youthful individual whose mien possessed an intriguing dichotomy, simultaneously unassuming and remarkably distinctive. The unknown visitor was attired in unpretentious garments, yet an undeniable profundity and sagacity emanated from his eyes. And could it be that a pair of diminutive wings adorned his footwear? "I convey felicitations from the celestial heights of Mount Olympus," Hermes declared, his vocalization respectful, yet imbued with unwavering assurance, and a direct pronouncement from Zeus himself. Laius sensed an accelerated flutter in his chest. Communications originating from the king of the gods were infrequent occurrences, and invariably held profound import. He cast a swift survey of the garden's environs to ascertain their continued solitude, then granted Hermes an assenting nod to proceed. Hermes meticulously retrieved the luminous parchment from his satchel and extended it towards the sovereign. "Zeus has discerned your commendable governance and your profound solicitude for the prosperity of your populace," he declared. "It is on this account that he wishes to caution you regarding a course of action you contemplate, one that holds the potential to inflict profound anguish upon both yourself and your realm." Laius received the rolled document with hands that quivered slightly. "What manner of admonition is this?" he inquired. "The oracle's pronouncement will elucidate all," Hermes responded with a soothing cadence. Zeus desires you to comprehend that this caution emanates from a profound esteem for your sagacity and an earnest solicitude for the felicity of your subjects. He firmly believes you possess the discernment to make judicious decisions, provided you are furnished with the complete spectrum of necessary insights. This particular strategy proved to be precisely the most judicious means of engaging King Laius. Far from perceiving himself as menaced or censured, the monarch experienced a distinct sense of veneration, that Zeus held him in such high regard as to proffer divine counsel. He meticulously unfurled the parchment and perused the prophetic declaration with utmost concentration. The oracle's pronouncement cautioned that Laius intended to seek the wisdom of a seer regarding the procreation of an heir to his royal lineage, and that should he persist with this particular endeavour, the outcome would precipitate calamity upon both his familial line and his dominion. Conversely, the prophecy advocated that he should instead direct his energies towards cultivating one of his deserving nephews to assume the mantle of sovereignty, thereby discovering profound gratification in being immortalized as a ruler, who ushered in an era of tranquility and affluence for his subjects. Laius perused the prophetic text on 2 separate occasions, meticulously pondering its profound ramifications. It was undeniable that he had indeed been contemplating an appeal to an oracle concerning the prospect of progeny. His consort, Queen Jocasta, had harboured fervent aspirations for a child, and as monarch, Laius experienced considerable duress to engender a direct successor. Nevertheless, the divine pronouncement intimated that this aspiration, albeit inherently human, would culminate in unforeseen adversities. This counsel presents a formidable challenge to embrace, Laius articulated at length. My subjects anticipate their sovereign to beget offspring capable of ascending to the throne. Your populace anticipates their sovereign to render sagacious judgments that safeguard the kingdom's enduring prosperity, Hermes rejoined. And Zeus is convinced that your inherent wisdom constitutes your paramount attribute as a governor. He reposes confidence in your capacity to distinguish between popular anticipation and what genuinely serves the collective welfare of all. The pronouncements of Hermes facilitated a profound shift in Laius's perception of the prevailing circumstances. As the reigning monarch, his fundamental obligation was not merely to conform to popular expectations, but rather to uphold what was morally upright. And if Zeus, the sovereign of the heavens himself, was issuing a caveat against a specific trajectory, then such an admonition warranted profound contemplation. "Would you convey a dispatch back to Zeus on my behalf?" Laius inquired. "Assuredly," Hermes responded. "Inform him that I am deeply appreciative of his divine counsel, and that I shall meticulously ponder the oracle's warning. While I may not render an immediate verdict, I pledge that when my resolution is made, I shall recall that my paramount responsibility is to safeguard the enduring welfare of my dominion." Hermes inclined his head in approbation. "That is precisely the calibre of rejoinder Zeus anticipated," he asserted. "Your renown for sagacity is indeed merited." As Hermes made ready for his departure, Laius posed a final query. "How shall I ascertain whether I am making the correct determination?" Hermes offered a gentle smile. "Zeus holds that virtuous sovereigns intuitively comprehend within their deepest convictions when their judgments are founded upon righteous motives. Rely upon your innate discernment and bear in mind that the most exemplary monarchs are those prepared to relinquish their individual aspirations for the collective well-being of their subjects. With these words, Hermes took his leave, gliding imperceptibly back through the labyrinthine palace passageways and vanishing into the nocturnal gloom. By the hour, Laius rejoined his celebratory gathering. Hermes was already soaring skyward towards the Olympian peak, bearing the monarch's reflective rejoinder to the supreme deity. Upon Hermes' conveyance of Laius's dispatch to Zeus, the supreme ruler of the pantheon expressed his contentment with both the monarch's rejoinder and Hermes' adept management of the delicate mission. That was truly commendable execution, Zeus affirmed to his youthful emissary. You discerned precisely the most efficacious method to engage a sovereign who was disinclined to heed admonitions, and you aided him in grasping that the oracle's pronouncement was intended to assist rather than to intimidate. It was certainly facilitated by the fact that he is indeed a virtuous king, Hermes rejoined. Once he apprehended that the warning originated from a position of deference, he demonstrated an openness to receive it. Zeus inclined his head in pensive agreement. That constitutes a crucial insight concerning the vocation of a herald, he remarked. The manner in which one imparts a communication can hold as much weight as the message itself. Individuals are considerably more disposed to assimilate challenging verities when they are presented with benevolence and esteem. Thus, Hermes assimilated yet another invaluable precept regarding his function as a celestial envoy. It was insufficient merely to transmit messages with precision. He also needed to possess an empathetic comprehension of the recipients and devise strategies to enable them to embrace arduous realities when circumstances demanded. Such sagacity would undoubtedly prove indispensable in the multitude of formidable undertakings that awaited him. As our previous narrative concluded, Hermes had just assimilated profound insights concerning the art of conveying challenging communiques with both sagacity and empathy. Yet the astute divine herald was on the cusp of realizing that his duties encompassed a scope far exceeding the mere transmission of verbal exchanges betwixt deities and mortals. The very thoroughfares he traversed daily were, in essence, imploring his dedicated oversight and solicitude. Envision, if you please, the sun-dusted arteries of archaic Hellas as daybreak painted the sky. These were decidedly not the meticulously paved, even-surfaced thoroughfares that the Romans would subsequently engineer, but rather serpentine earthen tracks, etched deep into the terrain by an untold multitude of wayfarers across innumerable epochs. Certain routes adhered to venerable mercantile channels that traders had frequented for centuries. Others represented more recent conduits, either hewn by military legions or forged when an individual chanced upon an expedient passage through a mountainous defile. One nebulous morning in the nascent throes of spring, Hermes soared above one of these secluded mountainous arteries when a scene unfolding beneath him captured his keen observation. A family found themselves marooned beside their incapacitated wagon, casting apprehensive glances at the ominous cumulus formations congregating above them. Their bovine beasts remained placidly within their yokes, yet it was painfully evident that the wooden spoke had fractured irrevocably, surpassing any immediate means of mending. Hermes alighted gently in the vicinity, retracting his pinions and adjusting his wayfarer's cap to assume the guise of a common pedestrian. The familial unit comprised an aged patriarch with benevolent eyes and hands etched by toil, his daughter who cradled a slumbering infant, and two juvenile offspring who clutched their mother's garments with palpable anxiety. Experiencing difficulties with your conveyance? Hermes inquired with a mild tone, drawing nearer with the affable countenance that invariably instilled a sense of comfort in unfamiliar individuals. The elder patriarch assented with a sigh of exhaustion. The spoke fractured approximately a mile yonder. Our objective is to reach my brother's homestead ere the vernal deluges render the pathways utterly impassable. He then made a despairing gesture towards their disabled mode of transit. As Hermes inspected their wagon, he became aware of a recurring issue that profoundly disquieted him. This was not the inaugural mechanical failure he had observed along this specific segment of the route. Merely 7 days prior, he had encountered 3 distinct wayfarers contending with analogous predicaments. The thoroughfare's surface was rugged and replete with concealed stones, capable of inflicting harm upon wheels and axles. There existed no indicators to alert travellers to perilous sections, nor any directional placards indicating the whereabouts of the closest smithy capable of undertaking repairs. With diligent effort, Hermes, utilizing his inherent divine capabilities, meticulously mended the family's fractured wheel and fortified the cart's precarious axle. Yet, as the profoundly grateful family made ready to recommence their arduous trek, a novel concept began to crystallize within the agile mind of the revered messenger deity. Before your departure, Hermes articulated with a thoughtful cadence, might you lend your assistance to a small endeavour of mine? My intention is to erect a distinctive marker stone at this very spot, designed to forewarn other unsuspecting wayfarers of the treacherous terrain that lies ahead. The family, eager to reciprocate his kindness, readily assented, and together they carefully selected a fitting stone from the dusty roadside. Hermes, with a precise flourish of his iconic caduceus, etched a concise yet immensely practical inscription upon its weathered surface. Rough road ahead. Check wheels and axles. Safe repair. Stop. Blacksmith Alexios. 2 miles south in Gia village. As the family offered heartfelt farewells and continued their onward journey, Hermes remained, standing beside his freshly placed marker stone, enveloped by a profound sense of accomplishment. This seemingly minor act of benevolence, he mused, possessed the potential to spare countless other travellers from enduring similar hardships. But why, he pondered, should such an initiative be confined to a single stone? Over the ensuing weeks, Hermes embarked upon a truly ambitious undertaking, one destined to fundamentally transform the very fabric of travel across the entirety of ancient Greece. Whenever his demanding messenger duties necessitated passage along the region's most frequented thoroughfares, he conscientiously allocated time to scrutinize the myriad obstacles and perils that ordinary citizens confronted during their journeys between the sprawling city-states. At perilous mountain passes, notorious havens where brigands were known to lurk in ambush, Hermes strategically positioned warning stones that not only advised travellers to proceed in fortified groups, but also sagaciously indicated safer, alternative routes. Near dependable natural springs and deep wells, he thoughtfully erected markers, precisely guiding parched wayfarers to sources of life-sustaining fresh water. At bewildering crossroads where numerous paths diverged in confusing multiplicity, He installed unequivocally clear directional signs, accurately pointing towards significant urban centres and providing precise, measured distances. However, Hermes's visionary scope transcended mere basic directional guidance. His exceptionally acute observational faculties enabled him to discern the more subtle yet equally formidable challenges that rendered travel both arduous and perilous. He meticulously marked stones that explicitly identified which roadside inns consistently offered honest service and equitable prices, and which skilled merchants could be reliably trusted to perform urgent repairs on carts and essential equipment. He pinpointed secure camping locations where travellers could safely spend the night, undisturbed by fear, and concurrently designated hazardous zones that were unequivocally to be avoided once the sun had set. The marker stones themselves, through Hermes's innovative touch, evolved into remarkable works of functional art. The deity ingeniously devised a comprehensive system of uncomplicated symbols, ensuring that even travellers who lacked literacy could readily comprehend their vital messages. A distinct carved cup, for instance, universally signified the immediate proximity of fresh water. A diminutive house symbol reliably denoted safe and hospitable lodging. A circle radiating stylized rays indicated an ideal, sheltered location for camping beneath the vast expanse of the night sky. Conversely, a range of unequivocal warning symbols graphically depicted imminent dangers such as precipitous cliffs, areas prone to devastating floods, or regions where wild and dangerous animals were frequently encountered. As news of these extraordinarily helpful roadside markers disseminated rapidly throughout the Hellenic world, travellers began to refer to them with genuine affection as Hermes stones. Yet the enterprising young god remained unsatisfied with merely identifying existing hazards and resources. He proactively commenced collaborating with local communities to instigate tangible improvements to the very roads themselves. In the bustling town of Corinth, Hermes orchestrated a collaborative project to meticulously fill dangerous potholes and systematically remove the jagged rocks that frequently damaged cartwheels. He meticulously instructed the town's populace on effective methods for collective road maintenance within their territory, patiently explaining that superior roads would inevitably attract more traders and travellers, thereby stimulating commerce and benefiting every local enterprise. In the more rugged mountainous regions, Hermes assisted villagers in establishing rudimentary emergency shelters, provisioned with essential supplies for travellers unexpectedly caught in sudden, violent storms. These were not elaborate edifices, but rather simple, sturdy stone huts featuring waterproof roofs, ample dry firewood, and stores of preserved bread and cheese, regularly replenished by local inhabitants in exchange for modest donations from grateful travellers. But perhaps Hermes's most profoundly innovative contribution was his elegant solution to the perennial problem of territorial boundaries. Disputes frequently erupted when travellers found themselves uncertain about which community's specific laws applied in a particular area, or when itinerant merchants were perplexed by local tax requirements and intricate trading customs. Working with remarkable patience alongside leaders from various communities across Greece, Hermes established a comprehensive system of boundary markers that performed a function far exceeding the simple demarcation of one territory's end and another's beginning. These sophisticated markers provided detailed, crucial information regarding local statutes, applicable tax rates, designated market days, and unique cultural customs that would be vital for visitors to fully comprehend. A typical boundary marker might read, "Welcome to Argos territory. Market days 3rd and 7th day of each week. Tax on trade goods, 1 silver coin per cart. Temple of Hera offers sanctuary to all peaceful travellers. Fresh water and lodging available at the Blue Dolphin Inn, 1 mile ahead on Main Road." These highly informative boundary stones proved immensely popular with both the travelling public and the local communities alike. Visitors deeply appreciated having transparent information regarding local regulations and available resources, while communities discovered that the markers significantly reduced misunderstandings and potential conflicts with strangers traversing their lands. As the months unfolded, Hermes's ambitious road improvement project blossomed into something far grander than he had initially envisioned. Communities proactively began to solicit his expert assistance with establishing sophisticated lighthouse systems for their coastal areas, crafting reliable ferry schedules for island navigation, and developing robust emergency communication networks capable of disseminating urgent warnings about everything from impending storms to coordinated bandit activity. The resourceful messenger god approached each new request with his characteristic ingenuity and an unwavering commitment to meticulous detail. For the coastal communities, he ingeniously designed signal fire systems that could effectively communicate prevailing weather conditions and the current status of harbours to ships approaching from various directions. The signals were elegantly simple yet remarkably effective. A solitary fire conveyed safe harbour. 2 fires indicated rough weather, but an open harbour. 3 fires unequivocally signalled that the harbour was closed due to exceptionally dangerous conditions. For the island communities heavily reliant on ferry transportation, Hermes meticulously devised scheduling systems that not only guaranteed regular service but also incorporated backup transportation provisions for unforeseen emergencies. He strategically established supply caches on uninhabited islands, where emergency ferries could make vital stops for fresh water and provisions during particularly challenging crossings. Most critically, Hermes orchestrated the creation of an expansive communication network that seamlessly interconnected all of his roadside markers throughout the entirety of Greece. Utilizing these stones as dynamic message posts, communities gained the unprecedented ability to share real-time information about prevailing road conditions, emerging weather hazards, and potential security threats that might impact travelers. For instance, if bandits were sighted lurking near a specific mountain pass, the nearest community could promptly inscribe a warning message at their local Hermes stone, ensuring that travelers would be apprised of the danger well before entering the hazardous zone. Similarly, if a vital bridge suffered damage from severe flooding, communities could immediately post warnings at relevant markers upstream, affording travelers ample time to identify and utilize alternate routes before encountering the impassable crossing. This groundbreaking communication network proved so invaluable that it eventually ascended to become one of the most pivotal information systems in the entire ancient world. Communities began to leverage the Hermes stones not merely for communication with travelers, but also to exchange crucial information with each other concerning crop conditions, burgeoning trade opportunities, significant political developments, and evolving weather patterns. The comprehensive system fostered a profound spirit of cooperation and mutual assistance, thereby strengthening the vital bonds between communities across Greece. Villages that had previously maintained minimal contacts began to collaborate actively to address common challenges. Trade flourished as merchants, feeling significantly safer, ventured to travel greater distances. Cultural exchange thrived as people felt an enhanced sense of confidence in journeying to distant festivals and important celebrations. As Hermes soared majestically over the sun-drenched Greek countryside during his routine messenger duties, he could observe with immense satisfaction the palpable, positive transformations his expansive road improvement project had wrought. The ancient paths were noticeably smoother and demonstrably safer. The ubiquitous marker stones offered invaluable guidance at every twist and turn. Communities were far more interconnected and cooperative than ever before. Most importantly, ordinary citizens could now embark on their travels with an unprecedented sense of confidence, secure in the knowledge that both assistance and vital information were readily available, whenever and wherever they might be needed. Zeus, from his Olympian perch, observed all of this with a steadily growing admiration for his young messenger's boundless initiative and profound wisdom. When he eventually summoned Hermes to the hallowed heights of Mount Olympus to discuss the monumental road project, his praise was both warm and unequivocally genuine. "You have achieved something truly remarkable," Zeus declared to him as they strolled together through the ethereal divine gardens of Olympus. "What commenced as a simple, compassionate act of kindness toward a single-stranded family has blossomed into an intricate system that is demonstrably enhancing the quality of life for people across the entirety of our revered realm." Hermes experienced a deep and abiding satisfaction at his father's heartfelt approval. Yet his agile mind was already contemplating innovative ways to further refine and expand the system's capabilities. "I have been pondering," he mused thoughtfully, "if we could potentially extend the marker network to incorporate crucial information about seasonal changes. Farmers, for instance, could share vital data about the optimal times for planting and harvesting in diverse regions. Sailors, in turn, could forewarn each other about seasonal wind patterns and the inherent risks of impending storms." Zeus smiled, a gentle acknowledgement of his son's ceaseless creativity and ambition. "I believe," he stated, "that you will continue to discover novel ways to aid people for as long as you fulfill your esteemed role as our messenger." And indeed, as twilight descends over the tranquil roads of ancient Greece, one might well imagine Hermes still traversing those very paths, diligently inspecting his marker stones, extending a helping hand to stranded travellers, and perpetually conceiving new methods to render the journey a little safer and immeasurably more pleasant for every soul who shares the enduring road with him. The triumphant execution of Hermes' ambitious road improvement initiative inadvertently triggered a profound transformation that the youthful messenger deity had not initially envisioned. As the pathways traversing Greece became progressively safer and more reliably navigable, an extraordinary phenomenon began to unfold within the bustling marketplaces of every town and metropolis. Commercial activity burgeoned with unprecedented vigor. Merchants who had previously harbored reservations about undertaking extensive journeys across perilous routes now embarked on regular expeditions between distant urban centres. Farmers whose produce had once been confined to the confines of their immediate villages were now discovering the lucrative possibility of transporting their harvest to larger markets, where their goods commanded significantly higher prices. Similarly, skilled craftspeople were successfully locating patrons for their creations in locales they had scarcely dared to imagine reaching. It was during a particularly vibrant morning amidst the expansive marketplace of Athens that Hermes first grasped the profound degree to which his infrastructure enhancements had reshaped the realm of commerce. He had paused at the agora, tasked with conveying a missive from Athena to one of her revered priests. Yet, as he ambled through the animated market, he found himself compelled to observe just how much more dynamic and remarkably diverse it had become. Traders from as far-flung regions as Crete were proudly displaying their exotic merchandise alongside the more familiar local Athenian wares. A master pottery maker hailing from Corinth was captivatingly demonstrating his intricate techniques to an enthralled audience of customers who had never before witnessed such exquisite craftsmanship. Farmers descending from the rugged mountains were actively bartering their artisanal cheese and fine wool for the prized olive oil and celebrated wine produced in the sun-drenched coastal regions. The very air vibrated with a lively symphony of conversations conducted in a half-dozen distinct dialects, as individuals from across the Hellenic world engaged in spirited business transactions. However, as Hermes' keen gaze continued to survey the effervescent market activity, his sharp intellect began to discern certain emerging challenges that were materializing alongside this newfound prosperity. Not all of the merchants conducting their affairs were adhering to the principles of probity they ought to have upheld. Some were nefariously employing counterfeit weights to defraud their unsuspecting clientele. Others were propagating exaggerated assertions regarding the intrinsic quality or genuine provenance of their merchandise. A cunning few were exploiting customers who lacked familiarity with equitable market valuations. Hermes observed with mounting apprehension as an aged farmer from a secluded mountain hamlet was unmistakably being swindled by a cloth merchant who was demanding 3 times the just price for a simple woolen cloak. The venerable farmer, evidently unaccustomed to frequenting large commercial centres, possessed no means of ascertaining that he was being egregiously overcharged. Without a moment's hesitation, Hermes approached the elderly farmer and initiated a cordial exchange. "That appears to be a magnificent cloak," he remarked, attentively inspecting the merchant's array of goods, "although I must confess I just observed an identical woolen fabric available for half that price merely 2 stalls away." The duplicitous merchant shot Hermes a furious glare, but found himself utterly unable to refute the undeniable truth of the statement. The grateful farmer extended his thanks to his benevolent new acquaintance and proceeded to seek out a more scrupulous dealer, while the dishonest merchant was left to ponder a re-evaluation of his questionable business methodologies. As Hermes continued his perambulation through the sprawling marketplace, he found himself compelled to intervene in several more analogous situations. He adeptly assisted a young woman from the islands in avoiding the purchase of inferior olive oil that had been illicitly adulterated with cheaper substitutes. He sagaciously cautioned a pottery purchaser about cleverly concealed cracks that had been cunningly masked with wax and paint. He judiciously guided a wool merchant towards discerning customers who were offering equitable compensation for high-quality goods. By the time the morning drew to a close, Hermes had successfully thwarted numerous instances of commercial deception and facilitated countless honest traders in connecting with appreciative patrons for their products. Yet, he had also acquired a profound new understanding of the indispensable role that fair dealing played in the sustained success of Greek commerce. When unscrupulous merchants engaged in deceitful practices, news of their unethical conduct propagated with remarkable swiftness throughout the expansive network of travellers and traders. This not only tarnished their individual reputations, but also cast a shadow over the standing of their entire communities. People consequently grew hesitant to conduct business with anyone originating from localities known for harbouring dishonest dealers. Conversely, merchants who had cultivated a reputation for integrity and the provision of superior goods attracted a loyal clientele from considerable distances. Their flourishing enterprises brought prosperity not solely to themselves, but extended its benefits to their entire communities. As the surge in trade generated a greater abundance of employment opportunities, fostered improvements in essential infrastructure, and ultimately led to enhanced affluence for all, Hermes recognized that actively promoting honest commerce transcended merely aiding individual customers in avoiding exploitation. It was, in fact, an indispensable prerequisite for the ongoing expansion and continued prosperity of all Hellenic trade. Over the course of the ensuing months, Hermes meticulously devised a comprehensive strategy aimed at fostering equitable commerce throughout the entirety of the Greek world. He commenced by instituting a system of merchant certification, which served to assist honest traders in establishing reputations for unwavering reliability and exceptional quality. Collaborating closely with well-established merchants renowned for their unimpeachable integrity, Hermes forged an intricate network of references and endorsements. Aspiring new merchants could attain certification by convincingly demonstrating their honesty and the quality of their wares to seasoned traders, who would then commend them to customers in other cities. The certification system operated reciprocally. Customers, too, could cultivate reputations as fair and dependable trading partners by diligently settling their debts promptly, treating merchants with due respect, and conducting their own commercial transactions with unblemished honesty. Hermes ingeniously integrated this burgeoning merchant network into his pre-existing system of roadside markers. The ubiquitous Hermes stones now not only furnish travellers with crucial information about certified, honest merchants in neighbouring communities, but also included explicit warnings about dealers who had been officially reported for fraudulent practices. However, Hermes' endeavours extended beyond merely identifying reputable and disreputable traders. He proactively began to assist merchants in refining their business practices and expanding the scope of their operations. For small farmers and craftspeople who felt daunted by the inherent complexities of large-scale markets, Hermes organized invaluable educational sessions focused on principles of fair pricing, stringent quality standards, and effective marketing techniques. He meticulously instructed them on how to present their goods attractively, how to negotiate equitably with customers, and how to cultivate enduring business relationships founded upon mutual respect and unwavering trust. For established merchants aspiring to penetrate new territories, Hermes furnished detailed intelligence regarding local customs, consumer preferences, and prevailing market conditions in diverse regions. He elucidated which commodities were in high demand in particular areas, what price points customers were accustomed to paying, and the most respectful approaches to engaging with potential trading partners. Perhaps most significantly, Hermes undertook the monumental task of standardizing weights and measures across the entire Greek trading network. One of the most pervasive sources of confusion and acrimony in ancient commerce stemmed from the fact that different cities employed disparate systems for quantifying grain, wine, cloth, and a myriad of other goods. A bushel of wheat in Athens, for instance, might represent a vastly different quantity than a bushel of wheat in Sparta, invariably leading to profound misunderstandings and contentious disputes when merchants from distinct cities attempted to engage in commercial dealings. Similarly, the specific measures for wine, olive oil, woven fabrics, and precious metals exhibited considerable variation from one locality to another, thereby rendering it exceedingly challenging for traders to accurately compare prices and calculate equitable exchanges. Working with remarkable patience and diplomatic skill alongside community leaders throughout Greece, Hermes meticulously developed a unified system of weights and measures that could be consistently applied across all markets. He established official standard weights in the principal trading centers and meticulously trained local officials to verify the accuracy of merchant scales and measuring implements. This ambitious standardization project proved to be far more intricate than it might initially have appeared. Numerous communities had adhered to their traditional measuring systems for generations, and a significant portion of the populace expressed reluctance to abandon familiar practices. Hermes was therefore compelled to meticulously and diplomatically demonstrate the tangible benefits of standardization. He illustrated to merchants how standardized measures would significantly simplify their ability to trade with partners from distant cities. He elucidated to community leaders how consistent standards would inevitably attract a greater influx of traders to their markets, thereby augmenting local prosperity. Crucially, he powerfully demonstrated how standardization would dramatically mitigate the conflicts and misunderstandings that possessed the potential to severely undermine trading relationships. As these nascent commercial standards were progressively embraced throughout Greece, trade became discernibly more efficient and considerably more profitable for every participant involved. Merchants could now calculate costs and prices with greater ease and precision when engaging with partners from other regions. Customers could confidently compare offerings from various sellers, secure in the knowledge of consistent measurements. Disputes arising from measurement discrepancies became markedly less frequent, and business relationships consequently evolved into more stable and trusting partnerships. Hermes also pioneered the establishment of a robust system for resolving commercial disputes, should they inevitably arise. Rather than permitting conflicts to escalate into protracted and costly legal battles or even violent confrontations, he ingeniously created a network of highly experienced merchants who were capable of serving as impartial arbitrators. These merchant arbitrators were meticulously selected for their sterling reputations for fairness and their profound, extensive knowledge of established trading practices. When disagreements emerged, both contending parties could voluntarily agree to present their respective cases to an arbitrator, who would impartially hear both sides of the argument and subsequently propose an equitable resolution. Although the arbitration system was entirely voluntary, it rapidly proved to be exceptionally popular due to its inherent advantages of being faster, more economical, and considerably more practical than formal legal proceedings. Most importantly, it empowered trading partners to amicably resolve their differences while simultaneously preserving the integrity of their valuable business relationships. As Greek commerce steadily burgeoned under Hermes' benevolent oversight, the nimble messenger god began to discern a profound transformation unfolding across the land. The robust commercial activity was not merely enriching the coffers of individual traders, It was fostering an era of widespread affluence and novel prospects throughout the very fabric of Greek society. Farmers, for instance, were unearthing fresh avenues for their agricultural yields, prompting them to refine their cultivation methods and boost their output significantly. Craftspeople, in turn, were uncovering patrons for bespoke creations they had never been able to sell within their local confines, which inspired them to cultivate novel proficiencies and engineer more pioneering aesthetics. Even those individuals not directly engaged in mercantile pursuits were reaping advantages from the augmented assortment of commodities now readily available in their community marketplaces. Moreover, the strengthened arteries of transport and steadfast commercial networks were catalyzing an unparalleled cross-pollination of cultures on a magnitude previously unknown. People traversing the land for business purposes invariably returned with novel philosophies, methodologies, and viewpoints from the diverse regions they visited. Communal festivities and grand celebrations acquired greater intricacy and splendor as communities obtained a richer palette of resources and finished goods from distant locales. Erudition and inventive breakthroughs disseminated with enhanced velocity as academics, creative talents, and ingenious minds traversed along the ever-secure and clearly delineated commercial thoroughfares. Zeus, observing these auspicious advancements, witnessed them with immense satisfaction in the prodigious accomplishments of his divine offspring. When he beckoned Hermes for a discourse on the triumphs stemming from the commercial enhancements, his contentment was palpable. You forged something that extends far beyond what I ever envisioned when I designated you as our celestial envoy, Zeus declared as they stood together on a balcony overlooking the bustling agora of Athens. You haven't merely refined commercial exchanges, you've fostered a more interdependent, affluent, and collaborative Hellenic society. Hermes felt profoundly pleased by his progenitor's commendation, yet his mind was already contemplating novel methodologies to bolster and elevate Greek commerce. I've been wondering about instituting periodic commercial conclaves, he mused aloud. Events where merchants from across the Greek world could gather to showcase their finest wares, exchange innovative concepts, and forge fresh mercantile alliances. Zeus smiled at his son's unbounded inventiveness and aspiration. I think that's a splendid proposition, he affirmed. And I suspect you'll find ways to ensure these gatherings would not merely achieve triumph, but attain mythical renown. And so, as the crepuscular glow descends upon the bustling emporiums of ancient Greece, one might imagine Hermes still walking among the merchants and customers, discreetly guaranteeing that each exchange is equitable. Every merchant operates with integrity, and every patron obtains commendable worth for their investment. His indefatigable work had revolutionized not only mercantile activities, but the very essence of Hellenic culture, forging bonds and affluence destined to persist through countless epochs. While Hermes had cultivated renown throughout Greece as a patron of wayfarers and a custodian of upright trade, a distinct facet of his character manifested during more subdued occasions. His uncontainable predilection for ingenious stratagems and a linguistic dexterity. This, however, was not the malevolent mischief of someone who derived pleasure from inflicting detriment. Instead, Hermes deployed his roguish talents to impart crucial wisdom, chasten the conceited, and sometimes simply to inject a touch of unforeseen merriment into mundane existences. It was during one of his standard dispatch missions that Hermes chanced upon an incident that aptly exemplified his distinctive methodology for managing challenging personalities. He had been sent to the affluent polis of Athena to convey a missive from the sea god Poseidon concerning forthcoming meteorological phenomena that would impact maritime endeavours and oceanic journeys. The message was destined for the venerable Captain Nicomedes, the port authority who orchestrated the activities of Athena's extensive armada of fishing vessels. But when Hermes arrived at the harbour, he swiftly ascertained that Nicomedes possessed a notoriety as arguably the most conceited and egocentric dignitary across the entirety of Hellas. Hermes found the port official presiding with an air of regal authority in the official edifice of the Port Directorate, encircled by a coterie of junior functionaries who heeded with overly zealous deference to each weighty utterance. Nicomedes was an imposing figure with a meticulously coiffed facial hair, sumptuous vestments, and a vocal delivery that evinced a conviction of his own paramount significance far beyond anyone else in the room. The fundamental flaw inherent in contemporary seafarers, Nicomedes was declaring when Hermes entered, is that they are deficient in the sagacity and practical knowledge that stems from a genuine comprehension of nautical matters. Now, when I was young, which was admittedly many years ago, fishermen venerated the expertise of their elders and adhered to the counsel of individuals possessing insight into the profound arcana of maritime navigation. Hermes absorbed this grandiloquent discourse with increasing mirth. It was manifestly evident that Nicomedes revelled in the resonance of his own utterances and seized every chance to underscore his purported mastery and dominion. Advancing with due deference, Hermes said, "Pardon me, esteemed gentlemen. I have a significant dispatch for Harbour Master Nicomedes from Poseidon himself." Nicomedes assumed a posture of heightened self-consequence and motioned for the junior functionaries to recede. Indeed, a celestial communique. "I am, in fact, Nicomedes, and I am ever prepared to accept pronouncements from the deities who inherently acknowledge my preeminent aptitudes for overseeing nautical operations." But rather than promptly relaying Poseidon's uncomplicated communique about weather patterns, Hermes found himself moved by the port official's hubris to employ an alternative strategy. Actually, Hermes said thoughtfully, Poseidon was rather precise regarding the modality of this dispatch. He said it should exclusively be entrusted to the most sagacious and seasoned nautical authority in Athena, and he wished for me to verify the identification of the appropriate individual. Nicomedes swelled with self-importance. "Well, of course I am that person. No individual within Athena, nor indeed across the entirety of Hellas, possesses a more profound comprehension of oceanic and atmospheric conditions than myself." "I'm sure that's true," Hermes concurred gravely. "But Poseidon said I should initiate a preliminary assessment of your erudition first, just to be unequivocally assured." He gave me a sequence of inquiries pertaining to nautical affairs and stated the dispatch was to be conveyed solely to one capable of furnishing accurate responses. The younger officials shared knowing looks, intuiting an imminent development of considerable intrigue. Nicomedes, however, was utterly convinced of his presumed mastery, that he eagerly consented to the examination. "Very well," he declared, "pose your interrogatives. I shall manifest the profoundness of understanding that has rendered me celebrated across the Hellenic archipelago." Hermes inclined his head gravely and unfurled a parchment. The first question is, what is the optimal methodology for securing a fishing vessel amidst tempestuous conditions when the gales originate from the southeastern quadrant, whilst the swells surge from the northwestern direction? This was an eminently pragmatic inquiry that any seasoned port official ought to have readily addressed. But Nicomedes had dedicated countless years primarily to his bureaucratic responsibilities and his inflated sense of self-worth, such that he had become disconnected from the tangible exigencies of maritime navigation. He hesitated and equivocated momentarily, then embarked upon an intricate and utterly erroneous elucidation that comprised mooring strategies that would have proven perilous, even in tranquil conditions, much less amidst a violent squall. Hermes attended courteously and meticulously, inscribed observations upon his parchment. "Intriguing," he remarked. And the subsequent inquiry, if the fishing apparatus of one vessel intertwines with that of another under the shroud of darkness, what is the customary procedure for equitably settling the predicament? Again, this was fundamental understanding that any port authority ought to have commanded. But Nicomedes offered yet another convoluted and entirely erroneous response that would have instigated contention and disagreement instead of fostering resolution. As the interrogation progressed, it became progressively apparent to all present, save for Nicomedes himself, that the port official's grasp of hands-on nautical expertise was remarkably meagre. The junior functionaries started to exhibit discomfort on behalf of their senior, while Hermes preserved his solemn demeanour and persisted in meticulously recording observations. Subsequent to the fifth erroneous response, Hermes despondently shook his head. "Alas, it appears an error has occurred," he said. "In accordance with Poseidon's directives, I am obliged to locate the most perspicacious nautical authority within Athena, and evidently that individual is not present." Nicomedes flushed crimson with mortification and ire. "What precisely do you imply?" "I hold the esteemed position of port official. I possess 2 decades of professional tenure. 2 decades of bureaucratic oversight, perhaps," said a subdued utterance from the rear of the chamber. All eyes gravitated towards an aged mariner who had been patiently awaiting an opportunity to address certain port-related matters. "Yet, young sir," he addressed Hermes, "should your quest be for one truly conversant with vessels and atmospheric conditions, you would do well to consult an individual who yet engages in practical, hands-on maritime labour." The venerable mariner, identified as Demetrios, demonstrated an accurate comprehension of every query posed by Hermes, and indeed a multitude of additional insights. He possessed an intimate grasp of atmospheric currents, mooring procedures, fishing gear restoration, vessel upkeep, and the nuanced indicators foretelling shifts in meteorological states. Crucially, Demetrios articulated these subjects with the unassuming assurance of an individual who had dedicated a lifetime to gleaning wisdom from the ocean, in stark contradistinction to the ostentatious grandiloquence that defined Nicomedes' declarations. "Ah," Hermes declared with a profound sense of accomplishment, "I am convinced that I have in fact located precisely the individual required for this delicate matter." He extended Poseidon's urgent communication to the venerable fisherman, who accepted it with a weathered hand, perused its contents with meticulous care, and then affirmed his comprehension with a deliberate nod. "This intelligence is indeed invaluable," Demetrios articulated, his voice grave. "There is a significant atmospheric disturbance developing, a nascent weather pattern that portends the arrival of sudden, violent squalls over the forthcoming 10 days. I shall personally ensure that every vessel in the fishing fleet is duly warned to remain in close proximity to the sanctuary of the harbour, and to maintain a vigilant watch for any precursory signs of inclement weather. As Demetrios departed with a swift purpose, intent on disseminating this critical meteorological information among his maritime colleagues, Hermes redirected his attention to Nicomedes, a gentle, knowing smile gracing his features. "You know," he began, his tone conspicuously benign, "Poseidon also charged me with conveying some sagacious counsel to you. He posits that truly astute leaders are characterized by their propensity to listen far more than they speak, and that the most effective administrators are those who humbly assimilate knowledge from the very individuals engaged in the practical execution of the work." The harbour master, profoundly chastened and thoroughly humbled by the entire extraordinary encounter, muttered an indistinct reply about the necessity of reassessing his comprehensive maritime knowledge before summarily dismissing the assembled officials. As the various functionaries quietly filed out, Hermes distinctly overheard their hushed conversations. Remarking on the refreshing novelty of witnessing someone acknowledge the seasoned fisherman's undeniable expertise, this particular brand of subtle yet remarkably potent stratagem evolved into something of a distinctive thought for Hermes. He possessed an uncanny aptitude for discerning individuals whose overweening arrogance or profound self-interest inadvertently created vexing predicaments for others. Furthermore, he demonstrated an unparalleled genius for conceiving imaginative and unconventional methodologies to facilitate their perception of their own conduct from an entirely novel and often enlightening vantage point. In the ancient and storied city of Thebes, Hermes once encountered a formidable merchant named Apollodorus, a man whose reputation had become infamously tarnished by his consistent practice of defrauding his diligent workers of their rightful earnings. Apollodorus would routinely engage labourers for the arduous task of loading and unloading his numerous ships, only to subsequently fabricate a myriad of specious pretexts to remunerate them with less than the remuneration he had originally committed to. Hermes, ever the master of disguise, approached Apollodorus cloaked as a seemingly affluent foreign trader, one purportedly seeking a trustworthy individual to oversee a substantial consignment of exceedingly valuable merchandise. He meticulously negotiated a most generous contractual agreement for Apollodorus's services, only to then orchestrate matters so that the merchant himself was compelled to undertake the vast majority of the strenuous physical labour, all under Hermes's seemingly detached supervision. At the conclusion of the long, utterly exhausting day, Hermes proceeded to invent a plethora of diverse excuses to systematically diminish Apollodorus's due payment. He asserted that the work had consumed an inordinate amount of time. He claimed that some of the precious goods had been handled with an unacceptable degree of roughness. He even criticized the merchant for taking an excessive number of unauthorized respites. By the time Hermes had concluded his meticulous and seemingly justifiable deductions, Apollodorus found himself receiving merely a paltry fraction of the sum he had been unequivocally promised. The thoroughly exasperated merchant vehemently protested, declaring such treatment manifestly unfair, insisting that he had toiled assiduously and was unequivocally entitled to his full compensation. It was at this precise juncture that Hermes divested himself of his disguise, revealing his true divine identity and pointedly observed that Apollodorus had just endured the exact same egregious experience he habitually inflicted upon his own dedicated workforce. "Now you truly comprehend," Hermes articulated with a gentle but firm tone, "how it feels to expend arduous effort only to be unjustly deprived of equitable remuneration. Perhaps this poignant experience will inspire you to treat your workers with a greater measure of justice and fairness in the days to come." Apollodorus was so profoundly impacted by this revelatory experience that he not only fundamentally reformed his business ethics and practices, but also assiduously sought out every worker he had previously cheated, meticulously compensating them for every drachma he owed them. However, Hermes' inherently mischievous and trickster disposition was not invariably directed towards imparting stern lessons to recalcitrant individuals. On occasion, he would employ his extraordinary cleverness simply to infuse mundane situations with unanticipated moments of pure joy or delightful laughter. During a particularly austere religious festival in the illustrious city of Athens, where the elaborate ceremonies had become so rigidly formal and excessively intricate that the populace appeared to have entirely forgotten the inherent joy that was meant to reside at the very core of the celebration, Hermes resolved to introduce a subtle touch of light-hearted magic to the proceedings. He orchestrated a magnificent spectacle causing the ceremonial doves, traditionally released during the solemn rituals, to perform an exquisitely synchronized aerial ballet before gracefully ascending into the azure sky. He enchanted the temple bells, compelling them to resonate with melodious harmonies rather than their customary unadorned chimes. He ingeniously arranged for the offerings of succulent fruit to miraculously proliferate, expanding in such prodigious quantities that there was an abundance of sustenance to nourish every single attendee of the festival. Most memorably, he imbued the majestic statue of Athena within the hallowed temple with a captivating illusion, causing it to appear to nod its divine approval whenever the innocent laughter of children echoed through the ceremonies. This enchanting phenomenon served to actively encourage families to integrate their children more fully into the celebratory activities, and consequently, the festival triumphantly reclaimed the profound sense of communal joy that had been noticeably absent in preceding years. News of these utterly delightful and whimsical tricks rapidly disseminated throughout the entirety of Athens, and the citizenry began to anticipate upcoming festivals and ceremonies with a renewed and vibrant enthusiasm, perpetually uncertain of what pleasant surprises might serendipitously await them. Hermes' burgeoning reputation as a remarkably clever and unequivocally benevolent trickster eventually permeated the celestial realms, reaching the ears of the other revered deities on the majestic Mount Olympus. Consequently, they frequently began to solicit his unique assistance whenever they were confronted with intricate and delicate problems necessitating exceptionally creative solutions. When, for instance, Apollo and Artemis found themselves embroiled in a protracted and rather trivial disagreement that was rendering the celestial atmosphere acutely uncomfortable for every resident of Olympus, Zeus himself entreated Hermes to intervene and diplomatically resolve the contentious situation. Hermes ingeniously orchestrated for both gods to simultaneously receive identical, exquisitely anonymous gifts, two resplendent lyres, meticulously crafted with special strings that possessed the extraordinary property of producing harmonious and mellifluous sounds only when played in unison. Apollo and Artemis were so utterly captivated and profoundly delighted by their magnificent new instruments that they spontaneously commenced collaborating on intricate musical compositions, and their erstwhile disagreement was utterly eclipsed and forgotten in the sheer, unadulterated joy of co-creating sublime music together. As the golden hues of evening gracefully descend upon the ancient Greek world, one might well envision Hermes settling into some secluded and tranquil alcove, meticulously charting the course of his next gentle ruse or contemplating his subsequent ingenious intervention. His celebrated pranks and his astute wordplay were far more than mere diversions or simple entertainment. They functioned as sophisticated instruments for subtly shaping the world, rendering it incrementally wiser, undeniably kinder, and immeasurably more joyful than it had ever been before his benevolent influence. As the ceaseless march of the seasons progressed, and Hermes's meticulously established network of roadside markers gradually became an indispensable and fully integrated facet of Greek daily life, a profoundly beautiful and entirely unforeseen phenomenon began to unfold, one that even the remarkably prescient messenger god himself had not entirely anticipated. The unassuming stone markers he had initially placed with the sole intention of assisting weary travellers had, over time, begun to acquire a far deeper, more resonant significance within the very hearts and minds of the countless individuals who relied upon them. This profound transformation commenced with modest, spontaneous gestures of heartfelt gratitude. A resourceful merchant whose very life had been providentially spared by a timely warning about lurking bandits, thoughtfully left a small offering of nourishing bread and a libation of wine beside the particular Hermes stone that had furnished him with the crucial, life-saving intelligence. Similarly, a family that had fortuitously discovered shelter during a torrential storm, thanks to the precise directions meticulously carved upon a marker, returned the subsequent day with vibrant wildflowers to reverently place at its base. These organic, spontaneous acts of profound thanksgiving gradually coalesced and solidified into a cherished tradition. Travellers thereafter began to consistently leave small, meaningful gifts at the Hermes stones, not merely as expressions of gratitude for assistance already rendered, but also as earnest supplications for divine protection and sagacious guidance on the perilous journeys that lay before them. Hermes himself became aware of this burgeoning tradition during one of his customary inspection circuits of the extensive marker network. At a particular stone he had strategically positioned near a treacherous mountain pass, he discovered a small, poignant collection of offerings that travellers had left behind, a scattering of burnished copper coins, a handful of sun-dried fruit, a diminutive wooden carving depicting a spirited horse, and a cluster of freshly picked wildflowers that someone had gathered along the winding roadside. Affixed to the rough surface of the stone with a piece of twisted cord was a small clay tablet, its surface bearing a message delicately scratched into it. "Thank you for keeping my father safe on his arduous journey to Sparta. Please, I implore you, watch over him diligently on his return trip. Alexia of Tegea." Upon perusing this simple yet profoundly heartfelt message, Hermes experienced a profound warmth permeating his chest, a sensation far deeper and more resonant than the customary satisfaction he typically derived from his many helpful interventions. Someone he had never personally encountered was placing her unwavering trust in him to safeguard her beloved father, and she had taken the considerable effort to articulate her gratitude and her heartfelt concern in this extraordinarily touching manner. As Hermes persevered with his comprehensive inspection tour, he continued to unearth similar offerings and earnest messages at numerous stone markers distributed throughout his vast network. People were now regarding the Hermes stones not merely as pragmatic sources of essential logistical information, but rather as tangible points of connection with the divine protection they fervently hoped would ensure their safety and well-being on their often perilous journeys. This profound realization ignited an extraordinary idea within Hermes, an insight that would ultimately transform these humble marker stones from simple road signs into something immeasurably more meaningful and spiritually potent. Working with meticulous care over the ensuing several months, Hermes commenced the systematic conversion of his most strategically important marker stones into bona fide roadside shrines. He artfully carved small protective niches into the stones, specifically designed to allow travelers to safely deposit their offerings. He also meticulously added simple altar spaces where individuals could perform brief prayers or conduct small personal ceremonies before embarking upon the more perilous segments of their journeys. Most significantly, he began to personally spend considerable time at these burgeoning shrines, often manifesting himself to travellers who appeared to be in genuine need of extra assistance or divine guidance. On occasion, he would appear in his true resplendent form as the winged messenger god, offering direct and powerful divine aid to individuals confronting grave and immediate dangers. However, more frequently, he would assume various benevolent disguises, an experienced and knowledgeable traveller capable of providing invaluable advice about prevailing road conditions, a kindly local resident intimately familiar with safe places to encamp, or a reputable merchant who could recommend honest innkeepers and fair-priced suppliers. These personal and often miraculous interventions rapidly became the genesis of countless captivating stories that spread like wildfire throughout the entire Greek world. Travellers would return to their homes recounting extraordinary tales of mysterious strangers who had appeared precisely at the opportune moment to furnish them with the exact assistance they desperately required, only to vanish as enigmatically as they had first materialized. A quintessential example of such a narrative might unfold thus. A young woman, embarking on a solitary journey to attend her sister's wedding, became hopelessly disoriented within a bewildering forest, where numerous paths branched confusingly in different directions. As the encroaching darkness deepened and a palpable sense of panic began to grip her, she fortuitously stumbled upon a Hermes shrine, where she paused to fervently pray for divine guidance. While she was engaged in her earnest supplication, an elderly traveller approached her, offering to share his campsite for the impending night. He seemed to possess an intimate knowledge of the labyrinthine forest, and he reassuringly assured her that one of the paths would lead her safely to her intended destination if she followed it diligently at the first light of dawn. The venerable old man generously shared his meagre provisions with her, regaled her with engaging stories that helped to assuage her mounting fears, and meticulously ensured she had a comfortable and secure place to rest. In the morning, he precisely indicated the correct path, furnished her with remarkably detailed directions to her sister's village, and thoughtfully provided her with additional food for the remainder of her journey. When the young woman ultimately reached her destination safely and recounted her astonishing tale, The local populace immediately recognized it as yet another testament to Hermes's benevolent protection. The recurring motifs of the mysterious, helpful stranger, the impeccable timing of the intervention, and the extraordinarily generous assistance were all unequivocally characteristic of the messenger god's divine interventions. As news of these profound encounters rapidly disseminated, the rudimentary roadside markers transformed into increasingly vital and revered destinations for wayfarers across the expanse of Greece. Individuals meticulously orchestrated their itineraries to ensure the inclusion of significant Hermes shrines, where they could present votive offerings, fervently solicit divine safeguarding, and occasionally be graced with direct supernatural intervention. Beyond their spiritual significance, these hallowed sites also blossomed into vibrant social hubs, providing a nexus where disparate travellers could convene, exchange invaluable intelligence, and extend mutual aid. Given that every soul who paused at a Hermes shrine was, by definition, a voyager in quest of succour and orientation, an immediate and profound camaraderie, a shared sense of empathy and collaborative spirit, spontaneously ignited among those assembled. Astute merchants would impart crucial insights concerning prevailing market conditions in various distant polis. Zealous pilgrims would share sagacious counsel regarding the most propitious routes to an array of sacred temples and jubilant festivals. Even ordinary family units found common ground, assisting one another with prosaic yet essential dilemmas, such as the repair of a broken cartwheel, clarifying intricate directions, or offering recommendations for suitable lodging. Hermes, the nimble messenger god, observed the burgeoning evolution of these nascent shrine communities with profound satisfaction. His humble marker stones, initially simple indicators, had remarkably blossomed into something that elicited the noblest facets of human character, an innate generosity, a spirit of profound cooperation, and an unwavering commitment to mutual assistance among utter strangers, bound by nothing more than the universal experience of being far from the familiar comforts of home. Yet the swift-footed deity was not content to merely be a passive spectator of this burgeoning positive phenomenon. He proactively began to champion and foster the establishment of what he termed travellers' guilds, informal yet potent associations comprising individuals who regularly traversed specific routes, thereby becoming invaluable fonts of assistance and critical information for less seasoned journeyers. A quintessential travellers' guild might encompass the discerning merchants who habitually plied the trade routes between the bustling port of Athens and the prosperous city of Corinth, industrious farmers who regularly conveyed their harvests to market in diverse urban centres, and skilled craftspeople who journeyed to various communities to ply their specialised trades. Members of these burgeoning guilds would convene with regularity at designated Hermes shrines to disseminate vital intelligence regarding current road conditions, prevailing weather patterns, emerging business opportunities, and potential perils lurking along their paths. More significantly, guild members solemnly pledged themselves to render aid to any distressed traveller they chanced upon, irrespective of whether that individual held membership in their particular fraternity. This philanthropic commitment forged an intricate, informal network of reciprocal support that rendered travel demonstrably safer and immeasurably more agreeable for everyone venturing forth. These innovative travellers' guilds achieved such extraordinary success that their purview swiftly expanded, encompassing responsibilities far exceeding mere roadside assistance. They began to orchestrate collective journeys, providing a much-needed sense of security for individuals who harbored anxieties about traversing alone. Resourcefully, they established emergency provisions caches at remote shrines, strategically stocked with sustenance and potable water, offering a lifeline to travelers caught in unexpected delays or unforeseen hardships. They even ingeniously devised a rudimentary banking system, an astonishing innovation that permitted merchants to deposit coinage in one city and subsequently withdraw an equivalent value in another, thereby substantially mitigating the inherent perils associated with transporting substantial sums of money across arduous, lengthy journeys. As the intricate web of shrines and the burgeoning network of travellers' guilds continued their relentless expansion, Hermes gradually apprehended that he had, quite unintentionally, brought forth an entity that was fundamentally altering the very essence and character of Greek civilization. The enhanced safety and newfound dependability of travel were catalyzing unprecedented levels of commercial exchange, fostering profound cultural intermingling and facilitating seamless communication between once isolated, distant communities. Ideas and groundbreaking innovations were now propagating with a velocity never before witnessed. Gifted artists and erudite scholars were discovering receptive audiences for their creative and intellectual endeavors in locales they had previously scarcely imagined reaching. Ambitious young individuals were actively seeking advanced education and promising opportunities far beyond the confines of their birthplaces. Even families, geographically separated by considerable distances, were now capable of maintaining far closer and more enduring connections. Perhaps most profoundly, the burgeoning shared culture that organically coalesced around the esteemed Hermes shrines and the diligent travellers' guilds was forging remarkably stronger bonds between the diverse Greek city-states and their myriad communities. Individuals who had hitherto primarily identified themselves through the narrow lens of their specific polis, as proud Athenians, formidable Spartans, or affluent Corinthians, were gradually beginning to perceive themselves as integral components of a more expansive Hellenic community, intrinsically united by shared foundational values of generous hospitality, unwavering cooperation, and steadfast mutual assistance. This profound cultural metamorphosis did not escape the discerning gaze of Zeus, the sovereign of Olympus, who promptly summoned Hermes to engage in a discourse concerning the broader ramifications of the messenger god's transformative roadside shrine initiative. "You have achieved something truly extraordinary," Zeus declared to his son, his voice resonating with admiration as they ambled through a verdant garden on the majestic slopes of Mount Olympus. What commenced as a pragmatic remedy for the challenges of travel has, against all expectations, evolved into a formidable force for the unification and invigoration of the entire Greek world. Hermes experienced a deep current of gratification at his father's astute recognition. Yet he remained pensive, acutely aware of the weighty responsibilities that accompanied such profound success. "I have been contemplating how best to safeguard the enduring spirit of cooperation and mutual assistance," he articulated. "The shrines and guilds are currently functioning admirably, but their continued efficacy hinges upon individuals willingly choosing to extend generosity and aid to strangers." Zeus nodded sagaciously in agreement. "That is precisely the pertinent question to pose. How do we effectively encourage people to uphold these commendable behaviors? even when such actions prove inconvenient or entail a personal cost. Hermes had been wrestling with this complex challenge for a considerable period, and he had formulated several insightful concepts that he was eager to impart to his father. I believe the crux lies in ensuring that every participant derives benefit from the system, he elucidated. When individuals perceive that their own acts of benevolence towards strangers ultimately culminate in receiving succor, precisely when they themselves are in need, they are far more inclined to sustain their active participation. This profound insight would serve as Hermes's guiding principle as he meticulously continued to develop and refine the extensive network of roadside shrines and travellers' guilds, ceaselessly seeking innovative methodologies to guarantee the system's enduring sustainability and its pervasive benefit for every individual involved. As twilight gracefully descends upon the serene shrines, thoughtfully dispersed along the ancient Greek thoroughfares, one might vividly envision weary travellers congregating around the flickering warmth of small campfires. Here, they would share captivating narratives of their diverse journeys and meticulously plan the ensuing day's arduous travel, all while Hermes, from the veiled depths of the shadows, observes with profound contentment, recognizing that his simple, compassionate idea for assisting stranded families has blossomed into an expansive phenomenon, touching every remote corner of the ancient world. As Hermes's esteemed reputation as the venerable protector of travellers and the steadfast guardian of boundaries expanded throughout the entirety of the Greek world, Zeus began to ponder whether his youthful messenger god possessed the requisite maturity and gravitas for the most solemn and inherently challenging of all divine responsibilities. Indeed, there existed one particular form of journey that demanded guidance more acutely than any other, one sacred boundary that necessitated the most meticulous and deeply compassionate crossing, and a specific cohort of travellers who found themselves in the most desperate need of an utterly trustworthy and empathetic guide. It was upon a tranquil autumn evening, when the initial crisp zephyrs began to descend from the rugged mountain peaks and the annual olive harvest neared its completion, that Zeus formally summoned Hermes to the magnificent great hall of Mount Olympus for a discourse that would irrevocably alter the very essence of the messenger god's divine duties. "Hermes," Zeus commenced, his voice imbued with a profound gravity that immediately conveyed to the young god that this was unequivocally no ordinary audience. "Your exemplary work with the roads and the countless travellers has illuminated an important facet of your character for me. You possess an innate understanding not merely of how to guide individuals from one geographical location to another, but more significantly, how to shepherd them through the most arduous and transformative transitions in their mortal existences." Hermes listened with unwavering attentiveness, his senses keenly perceiving that his omnipotent father was meticulously building towards an announcement of immense import. "There exists a unique and ultimate journey," Zeus continued, his gaze unwavering, "that demands the most supremely skilled and deeply compassionate guide imaginable. It is an inevitable passage that every mortal being must eventually undertake, yet it is one for which they can never truly prepare themselves, regardless of their wisdom or foresight. It is, in essence, the profound transition from the vibrant world of the living to the ethereal, often mysterious realm of the dead." Hermes felt a profound, solemn weight settle upon his shoulders, a tangible burden of responsibility, as he gradually began to grasp the monumental nature of the task Zeus was about to bestow upon him. For far too long, Zeus elucidated, his voice tinged with a degree of concern, souls departing from their mortal coil have been compelled to navigate this exceedingly difficult transition bereft of proper guidance. Consequently, some become hopelessly disoriented, adrift between worlds, utterly confused, and profoundly frightened by the unfamiliar and daunting journey that lies ahead. Others, in their profound attachment, stubbornly resist this inevitable passage, desperately clinging to the world they are reluctantly leaving behind, thereby inadvertently causing immense sorrow for both themselves and their grieving loved ones. Zeus rose from his ornate throne and deliberately walked towards a grand window that offered an expansive panorama of the verdant Greek countryside, where the faint, twinkling lights of countless homes flickered like scattered embers in the gathering twilight. I desire for you to assume the sacred mantle of Psychopomp, the preeminent guide whose solemn duty it is to assist souls in making the momentous transition from life to death, with an unparalleled sense of dignity, profound peace, and a clear understanding. The distinguished role of Psychopomp was universally acknowledged as one of the most sacrosanct responsibilities within the entire divine hierarchy. It demanded not merely the inherent ability to traverse seamlessly between disparate realms, but also the profound wisdom to gently assist bewildered and fearful souls in comprehending the momentous events unfolding around them, coupled with the boundless compassion required to assuage their deepest anxieties regarding the uncharted journey that lay ahead. Hermes embraced this new, formidable duty with the utmost seriousness it unequivocally merited. However, he also infused it with the very same thoughtful creativity and innovative spirit that had so distinctively characterized all of his previous endeavors. Rather than simply acting as a conduit, merely guiding souls from one realm to another, he meticulously began to formulate a comprehensive and empathetic approach designed to assist both the dying individuals and their grieving loved ones in coping with the often overwhelming process of death and the subsequent transition. His initial groundbreaking innovation involved making subtle appearances to individuals in the terminal stages of their earthly lives. Often he would adopt the guise of a benevolent stranger or a solicitous friend, his purpose being to gently prepare them for the inevitable journey that awaited. Instead of allowing the moment of death to arrive as a terrifying, unforeseen shock, Hermes delicately helped people to comprehend the profound changes occurring within them, and to anticipate what they could expect in the afterlife. He might manifest to an elderly farmer burdened by years of toil as a seasoned fellow traveller, who would sit quietly by the man's bedside, conversing softly about distant tranquil lands and serene, peaceful journeys. To a young mother grappling with severe childbirth complications, he might appear as a sagacious midwife, gently helping her to grasp the profound truth that at times the greatest act of love is the courageous act of letting go. To a valiant warrior, mortally wounded in the throes of battle, he could materialize as a trusted comrade, speaking eloquently of honor preserved, duty nobly fulfilled, and the profound peace that inevitably follows a life of struggle. In each distinct instance, Hermes meticulously tailored his approach to align perfectly with the individual person's specific needs, their deepest fears, and their unique understanding of existence. He never resorted to deception regarding the inexorable reality of their situation, but rather he skillfully guided people to perceive death not as a terrifying absolute cessation, but as a natural, albeit profound, transition to an entirely different form of existence. Of paramount significance, Hermes commenced his endeavours alongside families, striving to offer more profound solace and practical assistance to their departing family members. He meticulously instructed them on how to cultivate serene ambiances conducive to the process of dying, how to articulate heartfelt farewells, and how to embrace release through affection instead of grasping with fervent attachment. He demonstrated to these households how to congregate beside their dying loved ones, eschewing expressions of terror and lamentation, preferring instead to share cherished anecdotes, melodious tunes and tender dialogues that commemorated the individual's existence and ensured they felt enveloped by profound affection as they readied themselves for their ultimate voyage. Upon the precise advent of mortality's final breath, Hermes would manifest in his authentic celestial guise to escort the recently disembodied spirit across the profound chasm separating terrestrial existence from the realms beyond. His very being exuded an aura of tranquility and solace, and his profound comprehension of transit dynamics and existential demarcations rendered him the quintessential escort for this paramount of all human voyages. This ethereal conduit, linking the vibrant sphere of the living with the sombre domain of the departed, defied simple cartographic delineation with mundane markers or conventional signposts. Rather, it constituted an enigmatic thoroughfare, subtly interwoven with the tangible plane, yet extending into dimensions inaccessible to human comprehension. Spirits embarking upon this momentous odyssey necessitated the stewardship of one capable of traversing not merely the spatial intricacies, but also the intricate emotional and spiritual labyrinth inherent in relinquishing one mode of being for the embrace of another. It came to Hermes' attention that numerous spirits exhibited a profound hesitancy to finalize their cosmic transit, primarily due to their lingering anxieties concerning the cherished individuals they were compelled to forsake. For instance, a maternal spirit might steadfastly decline passage into the realm of the dead, her reluctance rooted in profound solicitude for her nascent offspring. Similarly, an agrarian soul might oppose the ultimate metamorphosis, troubled by the looming question of stewardship for his livestock and cultivated fields. In response to these deeply human apprehensions, Hermes ingeniously integrated fleeting sojourns into the mortal sphere as a vital component of his guidance process. He would tenderly permit these distressed spirits momentary glimpses, revealing that their kin were indeed receiving diligent care, that their worldly obligations were being competently managed by others, and that their bereaved loved ones, despite their sorrow, possessed the resilience to perpetuate their existence. Such fleeting perceptions of persistent vitality within the earthly domain served to liberate souls from their terrestrial preoccupations, enabling them to culminate their odyssey with profound serenity. Nevertheless, Hermes exercised meticulous discretion, ensuring these visitations remained concise and sharply delineated, recognizing that an undue prolongation of presence between these interconnected realms could prove detrimental to both the transitioning spirit and the mortal individuals they had left in their wake. As tidings of Hermes' profoundly empathetic stewardship permeated the Hellenic lands, a discernible diminution of mortal dread concerning mortality and its impending embrace began to manifest. Households commenced their preparations for life's ultimate cessation, imbued with greater sagacity and diminished apprehension. Societies progressively instituted sacred rites and established traditions designed to venerate the transition of life and commemorate the existences of those embarking on their final departure. Yet Hermes' pivotal function as psychopomp transcended the singular event of individual demise, encompassing instead the broader scope of calamitous events that afflicted entire populaces. In instances where pestilences, armed conflicts, or cataclysmic natural phenomena simultaneously reaped a multitude of souls, he would labour with unflagging dedication to guarantee that each and every spirit was afforded appropriate escort, irrespective of the tumultuous or disordered nature of their earthly departure. Amidst such widespread fatalities, Hermes meticulously orchestrated the intricate process of spiritual escort with an identical degree of methodical efficacy and precise scrutiny that characterized his administration of his vast network of terrestrial waymarkers. He would diligently ascertain that not a single spirit was disregarded or permitted to meander disoriented amidst the interstice of worlds, and furthermore he would liaise seamlessly with other celestial entities to furnish suitable succor and provision for the mortal survivors. Among the more formidable dimensions of Hermes' responsibilities as psychopomp resided the intricate cases of souls whose departure from life occurred amidst profound states of emotional upheaval. This encompassed individuals slain in moments of intense wrath, those who expired while nurturing profound grievances, or spirits consumed by debilitating guilt or poignant regret at the time of their passing. Such troubled spirits frequently encountered considerable difficulty in relinquishing their potent emotional attachments, thus impeding their progression upon their spiritual odyssey. To succor these distressed entities, Hermes devised bespoke guidance methodologies designed to assist them in comprehending and disencumbering themselves of their emotional encumbrances prior to effecting their ultimate transition. He might dedicate considerable temporal spans to a particular soul, facilitating their understanding of the formative events that had moulded their sentiments and enabling them to forge reconciliation with their past experiences. Occasionally, this intricate process entailed orchestrating fleeting interactions between the departed spirit and mortal individuals with whom a reconciliation was deemed essential. For instance, a son who had tragically perished whilst alienated from his paternal figure might be granted the ethereal means to convey absolution through vivid dreams or subtle omens. Similarly, a woman who had departed life weighed down by overwhelming culpability might be gently led to perceive that her perceived transgressions were, in essence, comprehensible human fallibilities that did not fundamentally diminish her intrinsic value as an individual. These profoundly curative intercessions demanded immense acumen and delicate perceptiveness, as Hermes was compelled to meticulously equilibrate the imperative requirements of the transitioning soul with the psychological and emotional welfare of living individuals who might be impacted by such preternatural communion with their deceased kin. With the accumulation of extensive experience within his esteemed capacity as psychopomp, he commenced discerning consistent paradigms in humanity's engagement with mortality and the act of dying. Individuals who had cultivated lives characterized by munificence, profound empathy and unblemished rectitude typically navigated the ultimate transition with far greater ease than those whose existences had been marked by self-centeredness, malevolence, or deceit. Moreover, those who had fostered robust bonds with their familial and social circles invariably possessed fewer lingering regrets and unresolved anxieties prior to their onward journey. This profound insight impelled Hermes to formulate yet another pioneering methodology within his psychopomp responsibilities. Rather than merely awaiting the actual imminence of death to initiate their preparation for the inevitable transition, he embarked upon a nuanced campaign of inspiring mortals to conduct their lives in manners that would inherently smooth their ultimate demise and subsequent passage. Utilizing his manifold guises and strategic intercessions within the terrestrial sphere, Hermes would delicately impress upon individuals the profound significance of settling disputes, articulating affection, and extending benevolence to their fellow beings. He would illuminate for humanity the undeniable truth that the very fabric of their lived existence would profoundly shape their encounter when the appointed hour arrived for them to relinquish those lives. This forward-thinking methodology concerning the preparation for mortality exerted a transformative influence upon Greek society. Individuals commenced investing greater earnestness in their interpersonal connections, striving with enhanced diligence to reconcile disagreements and mend historical grievances. Furthermore, communal structures fostered more robust networks of assistance for the succor of the aged, the infirm, and the terminally ill. Discourses of a philosophical nature delving into the quintessential meaning of existence and the enigma of cessation grew both more prevalent and more intellectually profound. The pantheon of deities residing upon the hallowed heights of Mount Olympus observed Hermes' dedicated endeavours as psychopomp with profound reverence and unstinting admiration. Hades, the venerable sovereign of the subterranean realm, evinced particular approbation for Hermes' singular adeptness in facilitating the arrival of souls into the domain of the deceased, imbued with a disposition of tranquillity and acquiescence, rather than trepidation and recalcitrance. Your judicious escort significantly alleviates the burdens of my dominion, Hades confided to Hermes during one of their customary colloquies concerning transitioning spirits. When individuals arrive within these confines already possessing a clear comprehension and willing acceptance of their altered state, their assimilation into their novel mode of being proceeds with remarkable celerity. Even Athena, the sagacious goddess of strategic intellect, lauded Hermes' pioneering methodologies in guiding the departed. You have, in essence, transmuted the act of dying from a harrowing ordeal of terror and bewilderment into a profound occasion for personal evolution, harmonious resolution, and spiritual enlightenment, she sagely remarked. Indeed, that embodies wisdom in its most practical and potent manifestation. As the cyclical progression of years unfolded and Hermes steadfastly persevered in his duties as psychopomp, he cultivated an increasingly profound insight into the intricate interrelationships binding all his diverse divine responsibilities. His superintendence over thoroughfares and voyages had instilled within him the paramount significance of secure transit and dependable direction. His custodianship of mercantile exchange had elucidated for him the inherent worth of equitable transactions and reciprocal confidence. His mischievous persona as the divine trickster had vividly illustrated the potent efficacy of sagacity and inventive ingenuity in surmounting formidable challenges. Collectively, these myriad talents and perceptive understandings proved indispensable in his sacred task as a mediator between disparate realms, Mortality, he cogently surmised, was nothing less than the quintessential expedition, the definitive transgression of boundaries, the most momentous metamorphosis any spirit would ever undertake. And akin to all voyages, its successful navigation was immeasurably facilitated when the voyager was attended by an erudite, dependable, and benevolent escort. As the veil of twilight descends profoundly upon the venerable Hellenic landscape, and kinship units convene around their flickering hearths, recounting the day's occurrences and readying themselves for tranquil slumber, one might envision Hermes somewhere amidst the enfolding shadows, accompanying a spirit embarking upon the tender metamorphosis from one existential plane to the succeeding. His ethereal presence, a beacon of solace and unerring direction within that enigmatic passage which all sentient beings are ultimately destined to traverse.